Chapter 270. Gale Lightning Strike. Ji Tianxing stared at An Ying, who had turned into a blur and was charging at him. He then performed the second move of the flying star sword technique with all his might. Two golden sword auras that were more than 2 meters long slashed towards the shadow from the left and right. Swish, swish. In an instant, the two sword rays flew 10 meters away and struck the shadow from both sides. They turned into a golden thunderbolt and struck the shadow. Kaboom! The deafening sound was like a thunderclap, reverberating in the spacious hall. The huge golden thunderbolt scattered the grey shadow on the spot and sent it tumbling backward. It fell to the ground 10 meters away, its life or death unknown. The golden thunderbolt struck the rocky ground, creating a 1/2 meter deep and 2 meter wide crater. Gravel and dust mixed together and splashed in all directions. The ground of the arena shook violently as if an earthquake had occurred. The spectators on the spectator stands widened their eyes as if they had seen a ghost. Their faces were filled with disbelief. The thousands of spectators in the hall did not make a single sound. They were all silent. Everyone was dumbfounded. The thousands of spectators on the spectator stands stared at Ji Tianxing in shock. They could not believe what they had just seen. A young man at the 3rd level of the Tongxian stage could execute such a terrifying sword technique. He could actually injure the 5th level of the Tongxian stage werewolf shadow to such an extent that it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. The werewolf shadow's combat ability was comparable to an expert at the 6th or 7th level of the Tongxian stage. How did he do it? This was too unbelievable. While everyone was still in shock, Ji Tianxing had already walked up to Werewolf Shadow's side and looked down at it condescendingly. The werewolf shadow was covered in blood. There was a huge sword wound on its chest that had broken its sternum and extended all the way to its abdomen. White bone stubble could be seen from the wound, and dark red blood gushed out continuously. What surprised Ji Tianxing was that the werewolf shadow did not die on the spot even though it had suffered such a serious injury. It was in a dazed state and was about to pass out. Its body was twitching unconsciously and its claws were scratching the ground desperately. However, it had completely lost its ability to fight and could not even stand up. Without a doubt, Ji Tianxing had won, and he had won thoroughly. The thousands of spectators in the stands finally came back to their senses. Everyone let out exclamations and shouts, trying their best to vent the shock and disbelief in their hearts. There were even more people who lost their bets, and because of this, lost their entire family fortune. They were so angry that they were about to go crazy. Some people cried out in surprise, some people shouted in disbelief, some people roared in anger, some roared in madness. The entire hall fell into chaos. The deafening sound waves reverberated in the hall, causing everyone's eardrums to hurt. In the east corner of the grandstand, Ling Sihai sat stiffly in his seat, his hands tightly grasping the armrest of the chair, and the blue veins on his forehead bulged. He stared at Ji Tianxing with his eyes wide open, his expression extremely ugly. How is this possible? He's only been in the Sky Pillar sect for a few months. How could he have reached the 3rd level of the Profound Enlightening Realm and even defeated a 5th level Profound Enlightening Realm werewolf? Why? Why did Ji Tianxing, that little bastard, grow so quickly? Ling Sihai's expression was hideous and twisted. His eyes were spewing flames of anger as he cursed in his heart. Just a moment ago, when he saw Ji Tianxing, he was wild with joy, thinking that he would be able to see Ji Tianxing die without a complete corpse. However, the result was completely out of his expectations. Ji Tianxing had actually defeated Werewolf An Ying. How could he believe this? How could he not be mad with anger? After a long time, Ling Sihai's hideous expression finally calmed down, and his eyes returned to their cold and gloomy state. He glared at Ji Tianxing with resentment and cursed in his heart, "Little bastard, I didn't expect you to have grown to this extent. However, I've already made preparations. No matter what, you'll definitely die. Instead of staying in the Sky Pillar sect obediently, you walked right into a trap and ran to Flame Spirit City. This is the will of heaven. The day you leave Flame Spirit City will be the day of your death." At the same time, Lei Qianjun quickly walked into the arena with 4 bodyguards. The 4 bodyguards quickly walked to Ji Tianxing's side and carried the unconscious werewolf An Ying away. Lei Qianjun raised his hand and motioned for the audience in the stands to quiet down. Everyone. This young man was able to defeat Werewolf and Ying. This is really beyond my expectations. This is simply a miracle. I'm also very surprised. After so many years in charge of the Beast King Casino, this is the first time I've met such an outstanding young man. However, since everyone has already placed their bets, then you must accept your loss. If anyone dares to take this opportunity to cause trouble, humph. He did not finish his sentence, but the nearly 1,000 audience members in the arena knew what he meant. In Flame Spirit City, no one dared to cause trouble without reason. Finding trouble with the Heavenly Eagle Casino was no different from seeking death. Many of the audience members had lost so badly that they had lost their family fortune. They all had mournful faces and looked as if they had lost their parents. However, no matter how angry and sorrowful they were, they could only endure it. Tonight's duel had come to an end. More than a dozen managers entered the hall with hundreds of bodyguards. They maintained order around the stands to ensure that the audience left in an orderly manner and that no accidents would occur. Lei Qianjun turned his head to look at Ji Tianxing, who was next to him. He smiled in appreciation and nodded at him. Young man, you're really amazing. Your duel with Werewolf and Ying just now was an eye-opener for me. Let's go. I'll bring you to see our boss now. If you have any wishes, just say it. The boss will definitely fulfill them. After that, he led Ji Tianxing out of the arena and through a secret passage to see the boss of the Heavenly Eagle Casino. Logically speaking, Ji Tianxing had severely injured Werewolf and Ying to the point of near death. It would take at least half a year for him to recover. Lei Qianjun should be angry or worried. However, he was in an extremely good mood. He could not hide the smile on his face and his attitude towards Ji Tianxing was very amiable. Ji Tianxing guessed the reason. It must be because of his miraculous victory that made thousands of audience members lose everything. The Heavenly Eagle Casino made a huge profit. No one would know how much the Heavenly Eagle Casino had made tonight. However, Ji Tianxing could guess that it must be an astronomical figure. About half an hour later, Lei Qianjun brought him to the depths of the Heavenly Eagle Casino. They entered a magnificent palace. In the brightly lit main hall, there were musical instruments and women singing. The rich aroma of wine and meat wafted in the air. When Ji Tianxing followed Lei Qianjun into the main hall, he saw more than a dozen beautiful young women wearing thin silk dresses dancing in the hall. On the throne at the head of the hall, there was a tall and sturdy man with white hair and beard. He was sitting on the throne with great confidence. Chapter 271. Even though the burly man was enjoying a warm, fragrant embrace and the sound of fine wine and fine food, he looked like he was about to indulge in sensual pleasures. However, Ji Tianxing could tell that this person was not frivolous at all. He had a domineering and fierce aura, and his eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. Without a doubt, this person was the mysterious Heavenly Eagle Workshop owner. Seeing Lei Qianjun bring Ji Tianxing into the main hall, the Heavenly Eagle Workshop owner raised his hand slightly. The music in the hall suddenly stopped. The singers and dancers all bowed and left the hall one after another. Even the two beauties who were nestled in the arms of the Heavenly Eagle Workshop's owner said their goodbyes in a soft voice and left together. In the blink of an eye, only the Heavenly Eagle Workshop owner, Lei Qianjun, and Ji Tianxing were left in the main hall. Lei Qianjun walked into the main hall and reported, "Workshop owner, Ji Tianxing is here. This child has already defeated Werewolf Shadow on the spot and severely injured him." The Heavenly Eagle Workshop owner held a wine cup and slowly tasted it. A playful smile appeared on his face as he sized up Ji Tianxing with eagle-like eyes. After a moment, he nodded and said with a smile, "Not bad. I haven't seen such an interesting junior in many years. You're only in your teens, but you defeated Werewolf Shadow with your mere strength at the 3rd level of the Mystic Enlightening Realm. Little fellow, if I'm not wrong, you should be an elite genius of the Sky Pillar sect, right?" Ji Tianxing was wearing the white robes of the Sky Pillar sect's inner sect disciples. With the Heavenly Eagle Workshop owner's experience, he could naturally recognize him at a glance. He could not see through the Heavenly Eagle Workshop owner's intentions, so he did not answer the question. He only cupped his hands respectfully and said, Junior Ji Tianxing greets the Heavenly Eagle Workshop owner. What kind of person was the Heavenly Eagle Workshop owner? Naturally, he could see through Ji Tianxing's intentions. He only smiled and did not delve into the matter. He held the wine cup again and carefully tasted it. He asked slowly, "Little fellow, since you've completed the challenge according to the rules, tell me your wish. As long as it's within my power, I can fulfill your wishes." Ji Tianxing did not beat around the bush. He cupped his hands and said, "Owner, I need a detailed map of the hidden fog mountain range." The owner of the Heavenly Eagle Workshop immediately frowned. He looked at him indifferently and asked in a deep voice, "Kid, the hidden fog mountain range is one of the most dangerous places in the ancient realm. Why do you want a map of that place? You are a young genius. Do not enter such a dangerous place and lose your life for nothing." In fact, he didn't care what Ji Tianxing wanted to do, whether he wanted to enter the hidden fog mountain range, or whether he could come out alive. He only said that to persuade Ji Tianxing to change his wish. After all, there was only one detailed map of the hidden fog mountain range in the entire Flame Spirit City, and it was in his hands. This map was incomparably precious. It could be said to be a priceless treasure. He was weighing the pros and cons in his heart, deciding whether or not to hand over the map. Ji Tianxing bowed to him and said calmly, "Thank you for your reminder, owner. However, I do need that map. I hope you can fulfill my wish." Seeing that Ji Tianxing was neither servile nor overbearing and was determined to ask for the map, the owner of the Heavenly Eagle Workshop frowned and looked at Lei Qianjun. "Director Lei, how much did we earn tonight?" Lei Qianjun glanced at Ji Tianxing. He hesitated for a moment and did not speak. With Ji Tianxing, an outsider, present, it was inconvenient for him to reveal the exact amount. However, the owner of the Heavenly Eagle Workshop had no intention of avoiding Ji Tianxing. Lei Qianjun could only answer truthfully, "Owner, nearly 1,000 gamblers lost everything. Just now, the manager reported that we earned more than 3,000 spirit stones and more than 500 million taels of silver. There were also some profound weapons, elixirs, and other bets." Although Ji Tianxing was mentally prepared, he could not help but be secretly shocked when he heard the amount. He knew very well that top sects like the Sky Pillar sect and the Tianjin sect only had a little more than 1,000 spirit stones in reserve. Tonight, he had defeated Werewolf Shadow and earned the Heavenly Eagle Casino more than 3,000 spirit stones. This was definitely a shocking amount of wealth. In addition to the spirit stones, there were also 500 million taels of silver, profound weapons, and elixirs. This was also a huge amount of wealth. Of course, the Heavenly Eagle Casino was a large enterprise. This wealth would soon be spent, so it would be difficult to preserve it all. Even so, Ji Tianxing could feel the powerful foundation of the Heavenly Eagle Casino. When the owner of the Heavenly Eagle Workshop heard Lei Qianjun's report, a trace of surprise flashed through his eyes. Clearly, he had not expected such a big surprise tonight. Ji Tianxing had brought him such a huge amount of wealth. His expression softened. When he looked at Ji Tianxing again, his eyes were much more amiable. After pondering for a moment, he nodded and said, "All right. Since I have set the rules, I will fulfill my promise and fulfill your wish." After saying that, he took out an ancient yellowed scroll from his space ring. A gentle green light enveloped the scroll and flew to Ji Tianxing. "Young man, this map of the hidden fog mountain range is the only one in the entire Flame Spirit City. It is a priceless treasure. I am giving it to you. You must take good care of it. Also, I hope that you will live well and not die young. After all, a young talent like you will have a great chance of working for me in the future. Ha ha ha." The owner of the Heavenly Eagle Workshop was all smiles as he laughed boldly. Ji Tianxing took the scroll solemnly and cupped his hands. "Thank you for fulfilling my wish. I will not disturb you any longer. I will take my leave now." The owner of the Heavenly Eagle Workshop nodded slightly and ordered in a deep voice, "Director Lei, see the guest out." Lei Qianjun hurriedly cupped his hands and left the hall with Ji Tianxing. The two of them passed through several palaces and walked through a corridor with carved railings and made of jade. They walked toward the entrance of the casino. Along the way, Lei Qianjun smiled amiably and said to Ji Tianxing in a meaningful tone, "Little brother, with our master's status, there are very few people who can catch his eye. The owner actually praised you to your face just now. This is rare. It seems that he is very interested in you." Ji Tianxing understood what he was hinting at, so he replied with a calm expression, "Thank you for your help, owner. I'm already very grateful that you're willing to give me the map. As for other things, I do not dare to think too much. After all, I am a disciple of the sect and have an important responsibility to fulfill." After hearing his explanation, Lei Qianjun understood that he was rejecting the owner's favor. Lei Qianjun sighed regretfully and said with a smile, "That's right. Young man, with your talent in martial arts, you will definitely be valued in the sect. Your future will be bright." After a while, the two of them arrived at the entrance of the casino. Lei Qianjun cupped his hands and said, "Well, I will see you off here. Young man, take care. We will meet again." Ji Tianxing also cupped his hands and bowed. He said goodbye and walked out of the Heavenly Eagle Casino. After leaving the Heavenly Eagle Casino, he walked toward an inn in the city. Next, he planned to study the map carefully and make sufficient preparations before leaving for the hidden Fog Mountain Range. Chapter 272. Under the night sky, Flame Spirit City was quiet and peaceful. After Ji Tianxing left the East City Market, he stayed in an inn in the city. After closing the doors and windows, he sat in front of his desk and took out a map from his space ring, preparing to study it. When he slowly unrolled the scroll and saw the map of the hidden Fog Mountain Range, he frowned as surprise flashed across his eyes. He did not expect the terrain of the hidden Fog Mountain Range to be so complicated. The map was filled with crisscrossing lines, like a spider's web, outlining the terrain and layout of the hidden Fog Mountain Range. Just looking at the map made one feel that it was very complicated and cumbersome. If one really entered the hidden Fog Mountain Range, they would not be able to differentiate between north and south and would encounter all kinds of dangers. Ji Tianxing was a little emotional as he thought to himself, "No wonder so many martial artists entered the hidden Fog Mountain Range and died in the end. The terrain of the hidden Fog Mountain Range is extremely complicated. It is like a huge maze shrouded in layers of fog. Without a detailed map, no one would be able to walk out of it alive." Fortunately, the map in his hand not only marked the various dangerous places in the hidden Fog Mountain Range in detail, but it also drew a few red lines. Those eye-catching red lines were the routes to enter and exit the hidden Fog Mountain Range. Ji Tianxing carefully looked at the map and memorized the various dangerous places marked on the map, as well as the routes to enter and exit. After a full 4 hours, he had memorized the entire map. Only then did he put the scroll into his spatial ring. It was already late at night, and the entire Flame Spirit City had fallen into a deep sleep. Everything was silent. "I have memorized the map of the hidden Fog Mountain Range. Tomorrow, I will buy some elixirs and charms in the city. Once I am ready, I can set off," Ji Tianxing muttered in a low voice. Then, he sat cross-legged on the bed and began to cultivate. During the battle in the Demon Cave, he was able to naturally temper his acupoints and quickly increase his strength at the critical moment of life and death. This allowed him to find a way to quickly increase his strength and also allowed him to comprehend the essence of the Sword Heart Tao. There was only one word, and that was battle. Only by growing in battle, experiencing the tempering of blood and fire, and the test of life and death would one be able to quickly master the Sword Heart Tao and become an expert in the Sword Tao. It was precisely because he understood this that he had entered the Heavenly Eagle Casino without hesitation and challenged the Shadow Werewolf. In this way, not only would he be able to train himself in battle and raise his strength, but he would also be able to meet the owner of the Heavenly Eagle Workshop after he succeeded in the challenge. It could be said that he was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. As it turned out, this was indeed a brave and wise move. Previously, in the duel with the werewolf Shadow, he had unleashed his lifetime's worth of cultivation and naturally refined an aperture point. Unfortunately, Werewolf Shadow's strength was on par with his, and the battle ended very quickly. If he had more time and was in a more dangerous situation, he would definitely be able to refine 1 or 2 more acupoints. Of course, other than increasing his strength in battle, he still needed to constantly cultivate. Cultivation was like rowing a boat against the current. If you didn't advance, you would fall behind. You couldn't slack off for even a day. Unknowingly, another 8 hours passed. The sky outside the window was already bright. A new day had arrived. Ji Tianxing ended his cultivation, washed up, and left the inn. He went to the market in the East City again and wandered around the various shops, looking for and buying things that were useful to him. He spent a total of 10 spirit stones to buy a few healing and detoxifying pills, a few talismans with special effects, and some miscellaneous items. After he was done with his preparations, he left the market in the East City and walked out of Yangling City. The city gate was still tightly shut and was guarded by a few guards. After Ji Tianxing showed his identity token, the guards opened the city gate and let him out. He walked along the black stone path under the city gate and arrived at the black stone tablet 100 meters away. When he placed the token on the stone tablet and activated the formation, he left Yangling City with a swoosh. The scene in front of him changed, and he returned to the vast and boundless grassland, standing beside the black stone tablet. He released Qian Yu from the 100 treasures brocade pouch. Qian Yu's body flickered with blue light and immediately became more than 3 meters long. Qian Yu, fly northwest. The hidden fog mountain range is about 2,000 miles away. As he spoke, Ji Tianxing jumped onto Qian Yu's back and sat down. Qian Yu immediately flapped his wings and took to the skies, heading towards the northwest at a leisurely pace. Its speed was not fast and could not be compared to Yun Yaro's spirit crane. However, Ji Tianxing was not in a hurry. After all, Qian Yu's strength would slowly recover, and its flying speed would become faster in the future. He sat on Qian Yu's back and faced the strong wind in the sky. His eyes swept across the mountains below and looked toward the northwest. A topographic map of the hidden fog mountain range appeared in his mind. He was silently thinking about how to enter the hidden fog mountain range and how to investigate after entering. Time passed quickly. When the sun had set, Qian Yu was only halfway there. It had used up a lot of energy and had to stop to rest. It could only continue flying after recovering its energy. Ji Tianxing let it land in the vast mountain range and stopped at the peak of a mountain that was thousands of feet high. The area within a few hundred miles was a vast mountain range. It was desolate and uninhabited. The mountain range was filled with primitive forests. Towering ancient trees grew on the peaks and a thick layer of fallen leaves piled up on the ground. Ji Tianxing found a flat and open grassland on the peak of the mountain and used a few millstone stones and some formation materials to set up a simple formation. This was only a mystic-level low-grade formation. It could not stop a mystic-level expert. However, it could shelter him from the wind and rain and protect him from the attacks of demonic beasts. He sat cross-legged on the millstone and closed his eyes to rest. He silently cultivated. Qian Yu shrank its body to the size of a kitten and went back into the 100 treasures brocade pouch to rest. Tonight, he would rest here for the night and continue his journey the next morning. He had plenty of time anyway. He was not in a hurry. Traveling in the vast mountain range late at night was not only slow, but also very dangerous. He would definitely attract the attacks of many demonic beasts. Resting on the peak of the mountain was the wisest choice. The mountain range was abnormally quiet at night. Occasionally, the roars of demonic beasts could be heard from afar. It added a sense of mystery and danger to the dark night. The sky was also filled with stars. The faint starlight shone down and covered Ji Tianxing's figure. His mind was tranquil, and he quickly entered a focused state of cultivation. However, in the middle of the night, when he was cultivating, he suddenly heard light footsteps coming from the peak of the mountain. He was instantly awakened. He immediately stopped cultivating and opened his eyes. He turned his head and looked around. From the corner of his eye, he saw a cold light flashing in the dark forest 100 meters away. He immediately recognized it. It was the cold light of a mystic weapon. Chapter 273. Ji Tianxing had become extremely vigilant after experiencing countless life and death situations. He immediately sensed that there were several martial artists in the dark forest. They were all armed with sharp blades and were approaching him with unknown intentions. He realized that something was wrong. His figure flashed as he jumped off the millstone and rushed down the mountain without hesitation. In this desolate and uninhabited mountain range, He had to be on guard against any martial practitioners who suddenly appeared with unknown intentions. Swoosh! Ji Tianxing used the shadowless step and left the open space in a few flashes. He rushed into the dense forest. He ran quickly through the forest and rushed to the foot of the mountain. He wanted to leave this troublesome place as soon as possible. Just as he left the open space, the martial artists in the forest let out a few deep roars and chased after him. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. One after another, black figures crossed the open space and the millstone. They were like ghosts in the night, chasing after Ji Tianxing as fast as the wind. Each of the black shadows held a shiny sword in their hands, which shone with a frightening cold light. There were a total of 10 martial artists in this group. They were of different heights, but their auras were all sharp and vigorous. They faintly emitted a murderous aura. More importantly, every martial artist was in the mystic comprehending realm. The speed at which they ran through the forest was even faster than Ji Tianxing. 9 of them were dressed in black. Only the burly leader was dressed in a blue robe. He took the lead and ran with all his might. His eyes were fixed on Ji Tianxing's figure in front of him. His face was very gloomy, and his eyes were filled with excitement and murderous intent. Damn little bastard, I didn't expect you to be so vigilant. However, let's see where you can escape to in this vast mountain range. He roared coldly. His veins bulged as he gripped his sword tightly. He was exerting a lot of strength. After all, he had been waiting for this day for too long. 15 minutes passed quickly. The group chased after Ji Tianxing to the foot of the mountain. At this time, the two parties were still 100 meters apart. Ji Tianxing did not slow down in the slightest. He dashed madly through the forest at the foot of the mountain, and the distance between them grew larger and larger. Seeing this situation, the blue-robed man decisively gave the order. Du and Ming, you and the 3 brothers who are the best in Qinggong will pursue that little bastard with all your might. You must stop him. Among the black-clothed men following behind him, a thin middle-aged man with a cold gaze immediately said, "Yes, sir." After that, the skinny man led the 3 men in black and suddenly sped up towards Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing was shuttling through the dense forest, nimbly crossing layers of ditches and obstacles as he ran towards the mountain in front of him. His expression was grave and gloomy, and there was a trace of confusion in his eyes. Damn bastard. There are actually 10 experts chasing after me. Who are these people? Before he could figure it out, the footsteps behind him became more and more hurried. He turned around and glanced behind him. He saw 4 men in black moving through the forest nimbly. They were approaching him quickly like ghosts. The 4 men were extremely fast. In just a short 15 minutes, they had caught up with him. Finally, at the river at the foot of the mountain, the 4 black-clothed men caught up with him and surrounded him. Ji Tianxing could no longer escape. He had to stand by the riverbank, take out the black dragon sword from the space ring, and hold it tightly in his hand. He looked coldly at the 4 black-clothed men and asked in a low voice, "Who are you people? Why are you chasing after me?" The 4 black-clothed men spread out and slowly walked around him. The swords in their hands shone with a cold light, and their bodies emitted a cold murderous intent. In the face of Ji Tianxing's questioning, the 4 men were expressionless and did not open their mouths to answer. Ji Tianxing frowned. His eyes looked past the 4 black-clothed men and into the forest not far away. He could guess that the 4 black-clothed men should be assassins. The real leader had not arrived yet. Sure enough, after a short while, the blue-robed man rushed out of the forest with 5 black-clothed men and rushed to the river bank. The 9 black-clothed men surrounded Ji Tianxing. They were all holding dark weapon-sharp swords in their hands, and their bodies were full of murderous intent. The blue-robed man walked quickly into the field. He stared at Ji Tianxing with a gloomy eyes and a smug sneer. "Ji Tianxing, you didn't expect this, did you? We meet again." When Ji Tianxing heard this familiar voice, his body suddenly trembled. His eyes became gloomy and complicated. He looked at the blue-robed man in disbelief and asked in a low voice, "Ling Sihai. It's you." He had never expected to see Ling Sihai in the ancient realm of stars. Moreover, Ling Sihai had brought 9 mystic comprehending experts to chase after him. Obviously, this was premeditated. Ling Sihai grinned and revealed a sinister sneer. He said in a low voice, Ji Tianxing, you killed my daughter, Yunfei. I must avenge her. If I don't tear you to pieces, I won't be able to vent the hatred in my heart. You think you'll be safe after leaving the Imperial City and entering the Sky Pillar sect? Even if I have to chase you to the ends of the earth, I'll take your dog life. In order to deal with you, I entered Flame Spirit City a month ago and made arrangements. I didn't expect you to seek your own death by entering Flame Spirit City. It's the will of the heavens. Even the heavens are helping me. After hearing Ling Sihai's words, Ji Tianxing finally understood. I see. Father told me in his letter that Ling Sihai had secretly left the Imperial City of Green Cloud Imperial City. So he secretly sneaked into the ancient realm of stars. Ling Sihai recruited these 9 assassins in Flame Spirit City. From the moment I left Flame Spirit City, they followed me all the way here. After understanding the whole story, he gripped the black dragon sword tightly with both hands. The true energy in his body circulated rapidly, bursting with battle intent and killing intent. Ling Sihai, whether you believe it or not, I'll say it one last time. I didn't kill Yunfei. Although this was the truth, how could Ling Sihai believe it? Ji Tianxing, you little bastard. You're about to die and you still want to deny it. Everyone, go. Tear this little bastard into pieces and burn his bones to ashes. Ling Sihai roared with killing intent and gave the order. The 9 black-clothed men brandished their swords without hesitation, using powerful killing moves to besiege Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing had expected that Ling Sihai wouldn't believe him, so he didn't waste any more words. With a clang, he drew the black dragon sword and counterattacked. Roar. The moment the black dragon sword was unsheathed, it lit up with a dazzling cold light. It slashed out a 5-meter-long sword light that seemed to split heaven and earth. The 2 black-clothed men closest to Ji Tianxing and at the front had no room to dodge and were instantly struck by the black dragon sword. Bang! Chapter 274. Once the black dragon sword was unsheathed, it would taste blood. The dazzling sword radiance and the illusory image of the divine dragon were the strongest attack of the black dragon sword. The 2 men in black were both at LV5 of the Tongxian realm. They were also assassins who walked on the edge of death all year round. Although they were cautious and had rich combat experience, they were still unable to block the strongest attack of the black dragon sword. This was probably the proverb, one strong man can defeat 10 skilled men. A long and narrow wound was left on their chests by the sword light. White bones were exposed, and dark red blood gushed out from the wound. It was fortunate that they did not die on the spot. They could only lie on the ground and twitch, unable to fight anymore. As soon as the 2 sides exchanged blows, Ji Tianxing made such an earth-shattering strike and severely injured the 2 assassins on the spot. Ling Sihai and the other 7 assassins were shocked, and their eyes were filled with horror. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would not have believed that this was an attack that a LV3 Tongxian realm martial artist could make. While everyone was still in a daze, Ji Tianxing took the lead to attack with his sword. He unleashed all his potential to perform his swordsmanship and made dazzling sword radiance all over the sky. Swish, swish, swish. 12 cold sword lights spread out in the night sky, scattering like a fan toward the surrounding black-clothed assassins. The assassins immediately came to their senses and did not dare to underestimate Ji Tianxing anymore. They desperately defended and counterattacked. Bang, bang, bang. The sword radiance and sword radiance collided fiercely in the night sky, bursting out dazzling light and bursting out violent and raging energy chi. Ji Tianxing's attack was blocked, but the other assassins took the opportunity to attack fiercely. Dozens of sword radiance and sword radiance enveloped him. He was suddenly in a life-or-death situation. His will to live burst out and his martial arts potential burst out again. He desperately waved his sword to block and kill. The genuine origin in his body was pushed to the limit, surging through his meridians and fiercely washing and refining his aperture acupoints. In just 10 breaths, the second aperture acupoint of his third sword vein was successfully refined. Of course, Ji Tianxing was completely focused on fighting the black-clothed assassins with all his might, so he didn't notice this. He used shadowless steps to reach his maximum speed, flashing and dodging the sword radiance and sword radiance. Ling Sihai and the 7 black-clothed assassins all launched a fierce attack with murderous intent. Every move and every style was a fatal blow. These 7 black-clothed assassins had obviously fought together often and had already formed a tacit understanding with each other. They had even practiced an exquisite joint attack sword technique. The 7 of them surrounded Ji Tianxing and attacked him fiercely. They advanced and retreated in an orderly manner, attacking and defending as one. Their attacks were like stormy waves, and their power was getting stronger and stronger. Ji Tianxing felt more and more pressure, and the situation became more and more dangerous. He could die on the spot at any time. Both sides fought fiercely by the side of the surging river. Their figures flickered back and forth at a speed that was too fast for the eyes to take in. Ding ding dang dang, the sound of swords colliding was endless, and the violent sword chi and strong wind were constantly spreading in all directions. The ground on the riverbank was covered with sand, which was also stirred up by the wind and sword chi. It was like a heavy rain. As time passed, Ji Tianxing's stamina gradually weakened, and he was beaten to a pulp. He had exchanged hundreds of moves with Ling Sihai and the others. His genuine origin was greatly consumed. He was sweating all over and his face was as pale as paper. Although he had a deep foundation and exquisite sword technique, using the black dragon sword to stab several assassins. But those assassins were incomparably experienced and always cleverly avoided their vital points. The assassins were only slightly injured and still retained their fighting strength. Ji Tianxing's injuries were more serious. He had suffered 6 sword wounds. The clothes on his chest and back were torn, revealing hideous wounds that were constantly gushing out dark red blood. Especially the bloody hole on his waist. It was a sneak attack by Ling Sihai when he was resisting the attacks of the assassins. However, in this tragic and dangerous fight, he had completely stimulated his potential and refined 6 aperture acupoint. Now his 3rd sword vein had refined 7 aperture acupoints. He only needed 1 more to reach LV4 of the Tongxian realm. Ji Tianxing, you are at death's door. Do you still want to resist stubbornly? Ling Sihai held the 3-foot-long sword in his hand and stared at him with resentment. He shouted with a ferocious face, "Kneel down and accept your death. Pay with your life for my daughter Yunfei." Ji Tianxing waved his sword to block the attacks of the 7 assassins and roared in a low voice, "Ling Sihai, dream on." Finally, he desperately swung his sword and forced the 3 assassins to retreat. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he immediately put away the black dragon sword and used all his strength to activate a huge sword radiance to perform the ultimate move of the flying star sword technique. Crimson Dragon Flash. The 2-meter-long golden sword radiance was burning with golden flames. Like a golden dragon, it fiercely attacked the 3 assassins in black. Bang! In the deafening sound, the 2 assassins in black could not dodge in time and were immediately blown away by the crimson dragon flash. The swords in their hands were thrown out and fell into the surging river. Their chests and abdomens were cut with a 2-finger-wide wound. Pieces of internal organs and a large amount of blood gushed out from the wound and sprinkled on the riverbank, emitting a strong smell of blood. After the 2 fell to the ground, they rolled a few times and stopped moving. Obviously, they had stopped breathing and died on the spot. Only 5 of the 7 assassins were left. A gap was immediately torn in the encirclement. Ling Sihai and the 5 assassins were stunned for a moment. They were shocked by the dazzling and terrifying crimson dragon flash. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ji Tianxing made a prompt decision to break through the gap and escape upstream along the river bank. He didn't care about his injuries at all, and he forcefully endured the piercing pain as he ran with all his might. In the blink of an eye, he rushed more than 10 meters away and drilled into the dense jungle. Ling Sihai and the assassins came back to their senses and immediately chased after him with angry yells. However, Ling Sihai only brought 4 assassins and continued to chase after Ji Tianxing. There was still 1 assassin in black who had to stay behind to deal with the bodies of the 2 assassins and treat his 2 seriously injured companions. Both sides began the chase again. Under the curtain of night in the jungle, they desperately ran back and forth. Ji Tianxing was drenched in sweat and panted as he ran. His physical strength was constantly depleting and his eyes became a little blurry. However, he still gritted his teeth and held on, desperately trying to escape. He ran wildly for 2 hours, crossed several mountains, and finally got rid of Ling Sihai and the others. At this time, he was already an arrow at the end of its flight. He staggered into a cave and immediately fell to the ground, gasping for breath. After a moment of rest, he quickly took out 2 healing and true yuan pills and took them. He also bandaged his wounds. He was very clear that he was only temporarily safe. Chapter 275. Although Ji Tianxing was extremely sleepy and seriously injured, he was in urgent need of medical treatment. If it was possible, he just wanted to lie down on the ground and sleep. But he had to stay awake and did not dare to delay. After simply treating his injuries, he continued to escape into the depths of the vast mountain range. Just after he left the cave, Ling Sihai and the others followed his tracks and chased after him in less than 100 breaths. The 4 black-clothed assassins checked the cave and found traces of blood that had not yet dried up. Ling Sihai immediately cursed with a ferocious face and ordered to continue the chase. The 4 assassins were all experts in pursuit and assassination. Even if Ji Tianxing left a little trace, it would not be able to escape their pursuit. The 5 people kept running in the mountain forest, getting closer and closer to Ji Tianxing. Time passed quickly, and the dark night gradually dissipated. When the sky was bright and a red glow appeared in the sky, Ling Sihai and the others once again caught up with Ji Tianxing. At this time, Ji Tianxing was running wildly in a large canyon. His clothes were completely drenched and dyed dark red by the bloodstains, making him look extremely miserable. However, his wounds were bandaged and treated, and he applied hemostatic and healing powders, so the wounds were no longer bleeding. Moreover, the medicinal pills he took had been refined, and the surging medicinal efficacy helped him recover 60% of his true essence. This canyon was located between 2 towering mountains. The valley was damp and dark, full of all kinds of strange flowers and grasses, as well as layers of vines and thorns. In the early morning, the canyon was filled with morning fog, and there was sparkling dew between the flowers and leaves. The colorful flowers, quietly blooming in the valley, looked very beautiful. But Ji Tianxing was not in the mood to appreciate the scenery. He passed through the shrubs and flowers as fast as the wind, making a rustling sound, and countless drops of dew. Not far behind him, about 100 meters away, Ling Sihai and the 4 black-clothed assassins were in hot pursuit, carrying swords and sabers. The 5 of them sprinted over, bringing with them a gust of wind, blowing the flowers and leaves all over the place. A quarter of an hour later, Ji Tianxing rushed into the depths of the canyon. This was already the bottom of the valley. A straight and steep mountain wall blocked his path. He had no choice but to stop and look around with a serious expression. There were cliffs to the left, right, and in front of him. The cliffs were covered with slippery moss and layers of vines. The surrounding soft ground was covered with weeds that were half the height of a person, as well as wildflowers and small trees of different colors. Behind him, Ling Sihai and the 4 assassins were rushing over as fast as lightning. Apart from retreating out of the canyon the way he came, there was no other way for him to escape. Damn it! This is a dead end. Ji Tianxing secretly gritted his teeth and cursed in a low voice, his eyes surging with a fierce light. At the same time, Ling Sihai and the 4 black-clothed assassins rushed forward and surrounded him. Everyone's bodies trembled slightly as they panted violently. They were not in a hurry to attack. Gripping their swords and sabers, they stared at Ji Tianxing and secretly adjusted their breathing. Little bastard, let's see where you can run off to this time. Ling Sihai gripped his blue sword and savagely glared at Ji Tianxing. He gnashed his teeth and shouted, "Even the heavens want to kill you. Your life is destined to end, so why haven't you surrendered yet?" Ji Tianxing was expressionless. Tightly gripping the black dragon sword, his entire body surged with killing intent. He was secretly communicating with the little black dragon with his spiritual sense and gravely asked, "Little black dragon, can you still hold on?" The black dragon sword communicated telepathically, "Old Ji, in the previous battle, I used up too much of my energy. I only have 40% left, so I can't change back to my original body and take you out of this canyon. But I can still barely hold on and fight with you one more time." Every time the black dragon sword was unsheathed, the The divine dragon phantom was the most powerful and dazzling strike. To be able to unleash such a stunning strike, Ji Tianxing's strength was undoubtedly required, but it mainly consumed the little black dragon's energy. In addition, Ji Tianxing had previously used the black dragon sword to fight a bloody battle with the assassins for a long time. The little black dragon's energy was constantly being consumed and declining, and now it only had about 40% left. Hearing its answer, Ji Tianxing silently muttered in his heart, "Since that's the case, then today I can only fight with my back to the river." He made up his mind, his eyes surging with a cold light as he stared at Ling Sihai and shouted in a deep voice, "Ling Sihai, let's settle the grudges between us today." Ling Sihai revealed a sinister smile and roared with killing intent, "Only your head and blood can wash away the hatred. Go to hell. Kill." Following his order, the 4 black-clothed assassins waved their swords and charged at Ji Tianxing with murderous intent, launching a siege. Whoosh 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 whoosh. More than a dozen dazzling saber lights and sword shadows slashed toward Ji Tianxing from 4 directions, bursting forth with a fierce energy. Ling Sihai also joined the battle, waving his sword and using his supreme sword techniques, thrusting out 6 sword glows that attacked Ji Tianxing's vital points. Ji Tianxing was immediately in danger and was about to lose his life. At this critical moment, his heart was filled with an intense desire to live. Filled with unwillingness, he desperately waved his sword and used his supreme sword techniques to launch a counterattack. Sword glows and sword glows fiercely collided in the air, producing the crisp sounds of metal clashing. Clang clang clang. Ji Tianxing was shaken back on the spot, his body trembling and bleeding. The black dragon's sword in his hand almost flew out of his hand. The little black dragon's aura became even weaker, and the power of its sword intent was also constantly weakening. Ji Tianxing swung his sword and exchanged a few blows with Ling Sihai and the others, but then he was struck in the back, blood gushing out of his wounds. The black dragon's sword was extremely weak and could no longer fight. However, Ling Sihai and the others became braver and fiercer as they fought, launching fierce attacks with murderous intent. At this critical moment, Ji Tianxing could only put away the black dragon sword and use the flying star sword technique. He fully activated the power of the sword embryo, directing 3 golden sword glows to attack the 4 black-clothed assassins. Thousand Feather Blade. The 3 sword glows immediately split into 9, stabbing at the vital points of the 4 assassins from various tricky angles. Whoosh 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 whoosh. In just 5 breaths, the 9 sword glows stabbed nearly 1,000 times at a speed faster than the speed of light. The area within a 10-meter radius was filled with golden sword glows, becoming dazzling and filled with sword chi. Such exquisite sword techniques immediately changed the expressions of the 4 assassins as they waved their swords to block in horror. However, they could not block at all. Their vital points were hit by the sword glows one after another, and blood was constantly spurting out. After 5 breaths, the sky full of sword glows and the 9 sword glows dissipated. The 4 black-clothed assassins were covered in wounds and bloody holes. They had been pierced into sieves. 3 of them fell to the ground on the spot, their bodies badly mangled and their auras cut off. The last one did not fall, but he was also seriously injured and on the verge of death. Blood was constantly foaming out of his mouth and nose, and his body was on the verge of collapse. Chapter 276. Ling Sihai's body trembled, and his face was ghastly pale. When he left Flame Spirit City, he was full of confidence and thought that he would definitely succeed. Even if Ji Tianxing's speed of growth was shocking, he would definitely be able to kill him with 9 mystic comprehending realm experts. However, when he fought with Ji Tianxing, he realized how terrifying Ji Tianxing's potential was. The 9 experienced assassins were all at least at LV5 of the mystic comprehending realm. However, these assassins were either killed or injured by Ji Tianxing, and they had all lost their ability to fight. Now, he was the only one left to face Ji Tianxing alone. When he saw Ji Tianxing's murderous look, he suddenly felt a chill down his spine, and a trace of regret flashed through his heart. He did not regret coming to the Star Ancient Realm to seek revenge on Ji Tianxing. He only regretted that he had underestimated Ji Tianxing and did not recruit more powerful assassins. Ji Tianxing looked at him coldly and slowly stepped forward. He said in a low voice, "Ling Sihai, it's your turn." Now that things have come to this, we can only fight to the death. Don't even think about running away. You should know that you can't escape. Ling Sihai was at LV4 of the mystic comprehending realm and was very close to LV5. Ji Tianxing, on the other hand, had successfully refined another acupoint in the battle earlier. At this moment, he had refined all 8 acupuncture points in the third sword vein and had naturally advanced to LV4 of the mystic comprehending realm. The outcome of this bloody fight was already decided. When Ling Sihai saw Ji Tianxing approaching, he immediately retreated with an ugly expression. He held the green sword tightly with both hands and shouted fiercely, "Ji Tianxing, stop it. I have something to say. I believe you. Yunfei was not killed by you. There must be a misunderstanding. Stop it for now. When I go back and investigate, I will definitely clear your name." There was no doubt that Ling Sihai was scared. He actually agreed with Ji Tianxing's words and begged for mercy in disguise. Ji Tianxing suddenly sneered and said jokingly, "Ling Sihai, you finally believe that Ling Yunfei was not killed by me?" "I do. Of course, I believe you." Ling Sihai suppressed his anger and humiliation and nodded repeatedly. Ji Tianxing sneered, "Hehe, I'll tell you the truth. It was actually Ji Ling who personally killed Ling Yunfei and framed me." Ling Sihai was stunned for a moment, apparently unable to believe this fact. However, in order to survive, he nodded without hesitation and said, "That's right. I had my suspicions too. Ji Tianxing, since this is a misunderstanding, please let me go. I will investigate this thoroughly." Before he could finish, Ji Tianxing interrupted him. "No need." Ji Tianxing coldly said, "From the moment you chased after me, you were destined to die. Since you already know the truth, then die in peace." As soon as his voice fell, he did not give Ling Sihai a chance to speak. He immediately activated two-sword chi and used the second move of the Flying Star Sword technique. Wind Thunder Strike. 2 huge golden sword chi slashed towards Ling Sihai from the left and right. The dazzling sword chi and the violent wind mixed into a golden thunderbolt and instantly struck Ling Sihai. Boom! With a thunderous explosion, Ling Sihai's figure was drowned in the golden light. His green sword flew out and fell into the grass not far away. A 3-meter-wide pit was created on the ground, splashing mud and grass all over the sky. The deafening sound reverberated in the canyon for a long time. Ling Sihai was badly mutilated by the wind and thunder strike. His body fell into the big pit, and half of his body was buried by the soil that fell from the sky. Everything was over. Just as Ji Tianxing said, the grudge between him and the Ling family was completely settled. The valley was silent, and only the smell of blood quietly filled the air. Ling Sihai was dead, and 3 of the 4 assassins he brought with him were also dead. The assassin who was lucky not to die, fell to the ground covered in blood and fell into a coma. Ji Tianxing staggered over, picked up the sword on the ground, and pierced the assassin's throat. After doing all this, he had exhausted all his strength. His whole body went limp as he sat on the grass, gasping for breath silently. After an unknown period of time, his physical strength recovered a little. He took out a few pills from the space ring and took them. Time passed quietly, and the morning fog in the canyon gradually dispersed. The sun rose slowly, sprinkling a ray of golden sunlight into the valley. About 2 hours later, Ji Tianxing used his energy to suppress the injury, and his true essence also recovered a little. He simply treated the injury, and returned the way he came, leaving the deep canyon. After he was far away from the canyon, he was completely safe. At noon, he found a secluded and dry cave in the mountains and settled down for the time being. He spent 2 hours to set up a formation at the entrance of the cave. Then, he sat cross-legged in the cave and silently used his energy to heal his injury and recover his strength. This night of chasing and killing had greatly damaged his true essence, and his injuries were disastrous. He could only stay in the cave to heal his injury, and continue his journey after he recovered his strength. 2 days passed quickly. On the morning of the 3rd day, Ji Tianxing finished his treatment and opened his eyes. After 2 days of recuperation, he consumed 4 black-level upper-grade pills and finally recovered his true essence. As for his internal injury, he had recovered 60 to 70%, and it did not affect his movement for the time being. However, the sword wounds on his body had left many scars, which could not be healed in a short period of time. After dawn, Ji Tianxing left the cave and woke up Qian Yu in the 100 treasures brocade pouch. After resting for 2 days, Qian Yu had recovered 80% to 90% of its strength, and it carried him into the sky to continue their journey to the hidden fog mountain range. That night, Qian Yu carried Ji Tianxing across thousands of mountains and rivers, and they finally arrived at the hidden fog mountain range after flying for nearly 1,000 miles. Even during the day, the hidden fog mountain range was shrouded in layers of fog, making it difficult to see anything. It was late at night, and the fog in the mountain range was thicker and more mysterious and dangerous. Ji Tianxing was not in a hurry to enter the hidden fog mountain range, and he asked Qian Yu to stop at the entrance of the canyon. Qian Yu, the hidden fog mountain range is very dangerous, and it's not suitable to enter at night. We'll rest in this canyon tonight, and we'll enter tomorrow morning. Qian Yu did as told and landed at the entrance of the canyon. It shrunk its body to the size of a kitten, and it went back into the 100 treasures brocade pouch to rest. Ji Tianxing stood at the entrance of the canyon, and with the help of the dim starlight in the night sky, he looked around and observed his surroundings. The canyon he was in was one of the entrances to the hidden fog mountain range, and the canyon was shrouded in thick fog that had not dissipated for many years. Chapter 277. The canyon was dark and quiet. There was not even a gust of wind. Occasionally, a ray of starlight would shine into the canyon through the gaps in the fog. Ji Tianxing sat on a black rock, holding the black ancient book and reading it carefully. Before this, he had already flipped through the contents of the ancient book many times. He stared at the last few pages of the book. There was still a corner of the torn page, and he could vaguely see a line of small words. Full Moon Lake. The aura of a divine item has appeared there. It was just a few words, but they contained important information. When he saw this line of words, he decided to investigate and came to the hidden fog mountain range alone. According to this line of words in the ancient book, he could conclude that the so-called divine item's aura should be referring to the heavenly star bead. The aura of the heavenly star bead had appeared in the full moon lake before. After he obtained the map of the hidden fog mountain range, he had carefully checked the routes and locations marked on the map. In the depths of the hidden fog mountain range, there was indeed a place called the full moon lake. From the canyon where he was now to the full moon lake, he had to pass through more than half of the hidden fog mountain range and at least 7 to 8 dangerous regions. After a long time, Ji Tianxing closed the book. His eyes were filled with anticipation as he muttered softly, "I hope I can successfully find the whereabouts of the heavenly star bead. My risk was not in vain." He solemnly put away the black ancient book, closed his eyes, and began to cultivate. The silent and long night finally passed. After dawn, Ji Tianxing ended his cultivation. After packing up, he walked into the canyon. The canyon in the morning was shrouded in a thick fog, and the valley was filled with the fragrance of flowers and dew. Ji Tianxing stepped through the knee-high grass, splashing countless drops of dew as he walked firmly into the depths of the canyon. The ground in the canyon was soft and damp, and it was covered with colorful flowers and shrubs. There were also many fruits of various sizes. Ji Tianxing had learned the 1,000 medicine collection before, so he could identify thousands of common medicinal herbs. With just a glance, he could recognize that most of the flowers and shrubs were medicinal herbs. Although most of the medicinal herbs were relatively common, they were not too rare. If he gathered all the medicinal herbs in the canyon, he could exchange them for at least 2 or 3 spirit stones. However, he was full of thoughts about finding the heavenly star bead. How could he have the time and leisure to gather medicinal herbs? About 15 minutes later, Ji Tianxing arrived at the end of the canyon. What appeared in front of him was a deep and narrow gravel path. The path was a gap between 2 mountain peaks. It was only about 3 meters wide, and there were straight and steep rock walls on both sides. If one stood on the path and looked up, they would only be able to see a sliver of the sky. Therefore, this path was called the sliver of sky. Gravel would often fall from the walls on both sides, piling up in the middle of the path, forming undulating piles of rocks. Ji Tianxing stood outside the entrance of the one-line sky and stared at the small path for a moment before stepping in. Of the heavenly star bead, of the heavenly star bead, of the canyon, of the canyon. Of the heavenly star, of the canyon, of the heavens, of the lee. He saw the colorful flowers as big as a washbasin. He thought they were ordinary flowers and did not pay much attention to them. However, when he walked past the huge flowers, they seemed to come alive. They stretched their necks and stuck to him. The huge flowers that were half opened suddenly opened and turned into a huge mouth as big as a washbasin. They stuck to his body. The huge mouth was filled with sharp spikes that looked like rows of teeth. They immediately pierced through his robes, through the extremely tattered golden sun-soft armor, and into his flesh. Ji Tianxing's body shook. He felt pain and numbness all over his body. His face turned pale. Damn it! It's the man-eating flower. He reacted instantly. The huge plants with thick roots and gorgeous flowers were the legendary man-eating flower. It was a monster that was between an animal and a plant. It was usually motionless and disguised as an ordinary flower. It would emit spiritual chi waves and fragrance to attract prey. Once the prey got close to it, the man-eating flower would open its bloody mouth and tightly wrap around the prey. It would use its sharp thorns to penetrate the prey's defense and use its sticky venom to numb and corrode the prey. Not to mention a human, even a monster with a strong body would find it hard to escape if it was entangled by the man-eating flower. In the end, it would be swallowed and not even its bones would be left. It would become the man-eating flower's nourishment. Ji Tianxing realized that something was wrong and struggled with all his might. However, his legs and waist were wrapped by the man-eating flower. Even if he used all his strength, he could not break free. Luckily, he could still move his hands. He immediately took out the black dragon sword from his spatial ring and slashed at the man-eating flower. Swish, swish, swish. The dark green stems of the man-eating flower were as thick as his arm. They were instantly cut off by the sharp black dragon sword. Dark green venom spilled out and sprinkled on the grass. Zzz, white smoke immediately rose from the ground. A large patch of wild grass was corroded into black ash. If this venom were to be poured on a human body, what would happen? Ji Tianxing watched in horror. He quickly jumped back to avoid being stained by the venom. Although the stems of the man-eating flower were cut off, its vitality was abnormally strong. The basin-sized flower was still wrapped around Ji Tianxing's legs and waist. The thorns were still drilling into his flesh and injecting the venom. He quickly tore off a few man-eating flowers and used the black dragon sword to cut them into pieces. He then threw them into the bushes at the side. He was finally out of danger. He could not help but heave a sigh of relief. Looking down at his legs and waist, he realized that there were large holes in his clothes where the man-eating flower had bitten. The wounds were filled with small pinholes. A large patch of his skin had turned dark purple. It was obvious that he had been poisoned. Luckily, he had already bought the antidote powder in Flame Spirit City. He quickly applied it to his wounds. Soon, it was effective. The numbness and pain all over his body disappeared. I was too careless this time. I was attacked by the man-eating flower before I even entered the hidden fog mountain range. What a bad start. Luckily, I reacted in time. If the poison had been worse, I would have been paralyzed and turned into fertilizer for the man-eating flower. After treating his wounds, Ji Tianxing muttered to himself, full of self-blame. He held the black dragon sword tightly and carefully stepped into the one-line sky. He advanced cautiously. After what happened just now, he finally realized how dangerous the hidden fog mountain range was. In this mountain range where there were few people, he could encounter danger at any time. Not only were living creatures, poisonous snakes, and insects fatal, but even the inconspicuous flowers and shrubs could be life-threatening. Chapter 278. It took Ji Tianxing an hour to cross the layers of rocks, but he only crossed the 1.5 mile long one-line sky. When he walked out of the one-line sky, he suddenly felt that the world had become wider. He had truly entered the hidden fog mountain range. He stood on a withered patch of grass and looked around with his sharp eyes to observe his surroundings. There was a thick fog above his head that covered the rising sun, causing the surroundings to be slightly dark. He saw a withered and decaying forest not far ahead. The trees in the forest were sparse, and most of them were dark brown. The treetops were bare, and not a single green leaf could be seen. At a glance, the bare black trees were like tall wooden stakes that stood on the desolate ground. Some of the trees were twisted and crooked, and the treetops were split in all directions. It looked gloomy and was filled with the aura of death and decay. The ground was covered with withered yellow leaves, and the thick layer was like a quilt. The leaves at the bottom layer were already rotten and emitted an unpleasant smell. The forest was dead silent, and there was not even a trace of wind. The leaves on the ground did not move at all. The sky was gloomy and dark, causing the air to be filled with the aura of death and desolation, causing one's heart to feel heavy. Ji Tianxing stared at the strange withered forest and frowned as he muttered to himself. The forest after crossing the one-line sky is marked on the map as the Forest of Death. Other than that, there's no other information. He did not understand why this withered and dead forest was called the Forest of Death. However, he guessed that since this area was marked on the map, it must be a dangerous place. Unfortunately, this Forest of Death was a place that he had to pass to get to the Full Moon Lake. There was no way he could avoid it. If he avoided this Forest of Death, not only would he have to take a long detour, but he would also have to break into other dangerous places. Thinking of this, Ji Tianxing gripped the black dragon sword tightly and walked into the forest. Rustle, rustle, rustle. His feet stepped on the withered yellow leaves on the ground, which made a soft sound. The surroundings were strangely quiet, and he could clearly hear his own footsteps and heartbeat. When he walked into the forest, he could clearly feel that the air was very oppressive. It was filled with a thick sense of decay and coldness. His face was solemn as he stepped forward. His right hand gripped the hilt of the black dragon sword tightly. His mind was tense, and his heart was filled with vigilance and vigilance. Although there was nothing in the withered forest other than dead trees and fallen leaves, there was nothing else. However, he felt a chill run down his spine, as if a pair of invisible eyes were watching him in the dark. That strange intuition made him uneasy, and he had to be on guard. When he had taken several hundred steps and entered the depths of the forest, a pile of fallen leaves at the edge of the forest suddenly moved twice. The withered and yellowed leaves silently parted to the sides. A grayish-white skeletal hand with 5 curled finger bones crawled out of the soft, fertile soil. This skeletal hand was dark gray in color. It was unknown how long it had been buried underground. There were a few cracks and gaps on the 5 slender finger bones, which were stained with dark red mud. The skeletal hand gently pushed aside the withered leaves on the ground and slowly extended outwards. Immediately after, a second skeletal hand emerged from the soil and pushed aside the fallen leaves on the ground. The 2 skeletal hands gently moved the soil and tried their best to extend outwards, bringing out a grayish-white arm from the soil bit by bit. Not long after, the soil between the 2 palms surged faster, pushing the withered leaves to the sides. A grayish-white skull gradually emerged from the soil, shaking left and right as it struggled. This was a human skull. There was a fist-sized hole in the top of the skull, and a few cracks extended outwards from the hole. Its eyes were deeply sunken, and 2 balls of light blue flames were embedded in the 2 holes, just like its eyes. Its chin had disappeared, and only half of its mouth was left. Its teeth were also incomplete, and it looked very ferocious and terrifying. This skeleton used its palms to support itself on the ground and twisted its body left and right. Soon, it emerged from the soil. A hole was left in the soil, and it was immediately covered by the fallen leaves. The grayish-white skeleton looked into the depths of the forest and seemed to be able to see Ji Tianxing's figure. The blue flames in its eyes kept flickering. It staggered its skeletal feet, stepped over the fallen leaves on the ground, and chased into the depths of the forest. At the same time, the fallen leaves on the ground all around began to surge and separate to the sides. Countless grayish-white skeletal hands emerged from the soil and pushed aside the fallen leaves on the ground. Before long, complete or incomplete skeletons crawled out of the ground one after another. In the eye sockets of each skeleton, there were 2 balls of light blue flames that flickered with an evil light. Some skeletons were tall and burly, some were incomplete, missing arms or legs, some held rotten swords in their hands, and a few skeletons only had half of their bodies left. However, all the skeletons looked into the depths of the forest and silently opened their mouths, revealing their white teeth as if they were sneering silently. Ji Tianxing was still holding the black dragon sword tightly. His footsteps were heavy as he advanced in the forest, and his eyes were sharp as he observed his surroundings. The scenery around him had not changed. It was still covered with bare dark brown withered trees, and the ground was covered with a thick layer of dead leaves. However, he was already in the depths of the forest. The light was even darker, and the air was filled with wisps of grey fog. He could only see 100 meters away. Everything further away was covered by the fog. Not long after, he saw a ball of light blue light floating in the grey fog 100 meters away. The light seemed to be light as it floated quietly in the fog, looking particularly mysterious and strange. Ji Tianxing frowned. He slowed down and continued to move forward. When he approached the ball of light blue light, he realized that it was a flame the size of a fingernail. When he walked in front of the light blue flame, the air flowed invisibly, causing the light blue flame to accelerate and rise into the sky. He raised his head and looked into the distance. He saw many light blue flames in the hazy grey fog, densely packed like fireflies on a summer night. "This is phosphorescence," Ji Tianxing murmured in a low voice, and a hint of seriousness flashed in his eyes. He knew very well that phosphorescence was what the common people called ghost fire. It only appeared in places where corpses were gathered. There were countless balls of light blue phosphorescence floating in the depths of the forest. Did it mean that there were countless corpses buried under the forest? Thinking of this, he could not help but purse his lips and shout in his heart, "I'm not even afraid of living people. Why should I be afraid of a pile of corpses?" Chapter 279. Ji Tianxing had just walked 100 steps when he heard a soft rustling sound behind him. The soft sound was like the sound of something nibbling on mulberry leaves, or like the sound of a breeze blowing the leaves. He immediately stopped and turned his head to look behind him. However, he saw that the forest behind him was empty. There was nothing out of the ordinary. Further away, it was shrouded in a hazy grey fog. He couldn't see clearly at all. He thought that he was too cautious. He was so tense that he was hallucinating, or he had misheard. He turned around and continued to walk deeper into the forest. However, he had only walked a few steps when he heard the soft rustling sound again. This time, he heard it clearly. It was definitely not a hallucination, nor was he mishearing. He turned his head and saw that the ground not far behind him seemed to have been blown by a breeze. Many withered and yellow leaves were gently rolling over. Within a radius of a few dozen meters, there were more than 20 places where the leaves were gradually bulging and rolling over. Looking at the situation, it seemed that something was trying to drill out from the ground. Ji Tianxing immediately frowned and walked toward a big tree in front of him. Under the big tree, there was a pile of withered and yellow leaves rolling over and over, constantly parting to the sides. He was puzzled. He couldn't help but pull out the black dragon sword and use the tip of the sword to push the pile of leaves away, wanting to see what was going on. With a soft rustle, the leaves on the ground were pushed away, revealing an empty area the size of a washbasin and dark red soil. Ji Tianxing suddenly saw a pair of broad and thick skeletal hands stretching out from the soil. It was trying its best to stretch out. When he saw the pair of grey skeletal hands, his face immediately changed. He had a bad feeling in his heart. He quickly turned his head and looked around. He saw that among the rolling leaves around him, there were white bones sticking out. In just a few short breaths, the pair of skeletal hands in front of him had completely drilled out of the ground. Not only that, there was also a huge skull that had drilled out of the soil. Its eyes were flickering with ghostly fire, and it was looking up at him. This skull was very big. It didn't look like a human skull. It looked more like the skeleton of a demon beast. Damn it! There are indeed a lot of white bones buried underground. They're going to come out. Ji Tianxing let out a low growl filled with shock. He swung his sword and slashed at the skull under his feet. Boom! With a muffled sound, the black dragon sword shattered the skull, turning it into a pile of bone fragments that scattered on the withered leaves on the ground. Although the skull had been shattered, the corpse's movements were not affected at all. Both its palms and body were twisting left and right, speeding up its climb out of the ground. What the hell? Don't tell me he can't be killed. Ji Tianxing narrowed his eyes and cursed with a gloomy expression. He did not waste any time, nor did he care about the surrounding corpses that had crawled out from the ground. He quickened his pace and rushed into the depths of the forest. However, all the skeletons in the forest seemed to be alarmed. Light rustling noises came from all directions. One after another, pale grey skeletons pushed away the fallen leaves on the ground and struggled to crawl out. In the hazy grey fog, more and more pale blue flames appeared. They floated shakily and constantly approached him. When the pale blue flames came closer, Ji Tianxing saw clearly that they were not phosphorescent flames floating in the air, but the eyes of the skeletons. All kinds of white skeletons rushed over from all directions. They moved their skeletal feet and sped up towards him. With a glance, he could tell that only a small portion of the white skeletons belonged to human warriors. Most of them were huge demon beasts. Some of the skeletons were complete. He could vaguely tell what kind of demon beast they were before they were born. However, most of the skeletons were broken and incomplete. Some of them were missing arms and legs. Some of them did not even have a head. There were also some skeletons that only had half of their body left. They were still wriggling and crawling on the ground. Such a strange and terrifying scene made one's scalp tingle and a chill run down their spine. Ji Tianxing's face was solemn, but his mind was still calm. He immediately ran wildly in the forest. He constantly waved the black dragon sword and slashed out dazzling cold light, attacking the surrounding skeletons. Bang bang bang! Those clumsy skeletons were slashed by the violent sword light. Immediately, they made cracking sounds and collapsed into a large pile of bone fragments, scattering on the ground. The pale blue flames in their eyes immediately floated in the air, rising and rolling along with the energy. However, the skeletons were extremely strange. Even if they were smashed into pieces, the broken bones on the ground could still slowly wriggle, gathering together and piecing together a complete body. Ji Tianxing waved his sword and cut the skeletons into pieces one after another. He sped up and rushed into the depths of the forest. However, after a short while, a series of cracking sounds came from behind him. It was not the sound of bones breaking. It was the sound of bones rubbing against each other as a large group of skeletons ran wildly. He turned his head and looked back. He saw that in the dark forest, a dense group of skeletons had appeared. They were running with all their strength. Countless pairs of pale blue flames, like pairs of emotionless eyes, stared straight at him. The number of skeletons was so many that it was impossible to count them. They were so densely packed that he could not see the end of them. Most of the white skeletons were the corpses of human warriors. However, in the sea of dense skeletons, there were dozens of giant skeletons that were several meters tall, which were particularly eye-catching. They were the skeletons of giant demon beasts. Some of them looked like demon wolves, demon tigers, and violent bears. Some of them looked like elephants or giants. What was even more bizarre was that there were many flying bird skeletons flapping their white skeletal wings. They flew quickly in the air and rushed toward Ji Tianxing like sharp arrows. In the blink of an eye, Ji Tianxing was surrounded by thousands of skeletons. He was surrounded in all directions, and the endless number of white skeletons immediately drowned his figure. At the moment of life and death, he still remained calm and composed. He waved the black dragon sword with all his strength, slashing out dazzling sword light and killing the white skeletons around him. Bang 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 bang. Ka ka ka. A series of muffled sounds exploded, reverberating through the forest. One white skeleton after another was cut into pieces by the sword light, turning into a pile of broken bones that scattered on the ground. Violent winds spread out, forming gusts of wind. The withered leaves on the ground were swept up and fluttered in the dusky sky. Ji Tianxing recklessly waved his sword and fiercely attacked, vowing to kill his way out of the sea of skeletons. He did his best to charge into the depths of the forest. Qian Yu flew out of the 100 Treasures brocade pouch and fought side by side with him and the little black dragon. Chapter 280. For an entire hour, Ji Tianxing did not stop swinging his sword at all. He swung his sword with all his might, slashing out dense sword lights and shadows. God knows how many white skeletons were shattered by the sword lights. The skeletons of humans and ordinary demon beasts were often cut into pieces by his sword. However, The scattered bones on the ground would slowly wriggle and form new skeletons. The broken skeletal hands would quietly crawl to Ji Tianxing's side and viciously grab his legs. The skeletons that rolled on the ground would try their best to open their mouths and bite him with their white teeth. The skeletons in the forest of death seemed to be endowed with life and intelligence. They relentlessly besieged Ji Tianxing, wanting to turn him into a pile of skeletons. The gigantic skeletons that were several meters tall and as large as houses were all extremely strong and had strong defenses. They were very difficult to deal with. Their movements were extremely fast, and they could jump dozens of meters with a single leap. The flames in their eyes were also dark blue, making them even stranger and colder. Even though the black dragon sword was extremely sharp, it could not defeat the gigantic skeletons in one strike. It could only injure them. Ji Tianxing used 100% of his power and slashed out more than 30 times before he was able to cut a giant skeleton into pieces, leaving only broken bones on the ground. After an hour of desperate fighting, he finally broke out of the encirclement of the skeletons. 80% of the thousands of skeletons had been killed by him and Qian Yu. Amidst the fighting, he kept moving deeper into the forest and covered several hundred meters. And this area with a radius of a few hundred meters was already covered with endless broken bones, piling up into small mountains of white bones. Ji Tianxing was so tired that he was gasping for breath. He was both physically and mentally exhausted. He only wanted to find a place to hide and rest. However, he knew that this was only an extravagant hope. From the moment he stepped into the hidden fog mountain range, he was destined to be in danger. At this moment, the grayish-white broken bones on the ground kept wriggling and gathering together. They began to churn and surge. Crash! The sound of broken bones rubbing against each other was heard. An extremely gloomy and cold aura of death spread out in the forest. A thick grey fog appeared out of nowhere in the forest, covering the white bones within a radius of several hundred meters. Ji Tianxing saw with his own eyes that the bones on the ground seemed to be attracted by an invisible force and gathered together at a faster speed. Catcher, catcher! The endless white bones piled up into a mountain of white bones, and it continued to grow and expand, emitting crisp sounds. In just 10 breaths of time, all the broken bones on the ground within a radius of several hundred meters had gathered together. A mountain of white bones more than 200 meters high appeared out of nowhere in the forest. The white bone mountain wriggled and shook for a while. Then, its appearance changed. It turned into a white bone giant that was more than 200 meters tall. The 4 limbs, torso, and head of this white bone giant were all formed from countless broken bones. 2 balls of deep blue flames surged within its deeply sunken eye sockets. It looked down at Ji Tianxing from above, lifted its gigantic skeletal foot that was as big as a house, and chased after him. Its gigantic foot crushed more than a dozen black withered trees in a row, causing the ground to tremble violently, leaving behind huge footprints. Every step it took could cover a distance of 100 meters. In the blink of an eye, it caught up with Ji Tianxing, lifted its gigantic foot, and stomped down fiercely. Ji Tianxing realized that things were not going well. He immediately used shadowless steps and fled forward as fast as he could. "Old Ji, get out of the way!" Qian Yu shouted anxiously. It quickly stretched out its claws to grab him and flew forward with him. Bang! Amidst the deafening noise, the white bone giant's gigantic foot stomped on the ground, causing a muffled explosion. The fallen leaves and soil on the ground were shaken into the sky. A huge footprint was left on the dark red ground. It was at least 4 or 5 meters deep, like a huge pit. Qian Yu and Ji Tianxing were lucky enough to escape the disaster. They just brushed past the white bone giant's foot. If it had been a little slower, Ji Tianxing and it would have been trampled into meat paste. However, Ji Tianxing had just breathed a sigh of relief. Before he could speak, he saw the white bone giant open its mouth and spit out a blue flame. The dark blue flame formed a pillar of fire that was as thick as a bucket and as long as 10 meters. It fiercely blasted towards him. He knew that the dark blue flame was formed by the condensation of endless ghost fire. It was very mysterious and strange, and contained a terrifying power. If he was hit by the dark blue flame pillar, the consequences would be unimaginable. At the moment of life and death, He unleashed all the potential of his life and desperately fled forward. Boom! The dark blue flame pillar brushed past him and fiercely hit the ground, causing an earth-shattering explosion. In an instant, a huge pit with a radius of 20 meters was blasted into the ground. Mud and soil splashed everywhere. The withered leaves on the ground were hit by the dark blue flame and were instantly burned into nothingness. An incomparably violent shock wave erupted. Mixed with the dark blue flame, it turned into a monstrous wave of fire that fiercely hit Ji Tianxing and Chen Yu. The two of them were blown away on the spot and tumbled to the ground 100 steps away. Chen Yu let out a painful scream and struggled a few times before it got up. Just now, it had used its body to block the monstrous wave of fire for Ji Tianxing and suffered a large part of the power, so its injuries were more serious. The icy blue fur on its body was dyed with a layer of dead gray and became dim, although it did not seem to be injured or bleeding on the surface. In fact, it had suffered internal injuries. Its body and soul were corroded by the dark blue flame, and its vitality was rapidly declining. Old Ji, be careful of the dark blue soul fire. It will devour your lifespan. It roared weakly in a low voice, reminding Ji Tianxing to be on guard against the dark blue flame. Ji Tianxing's body was not injured, but his internal organs were injured by the violent shockwave. His qi and vital essence were not flowing smoothly. He got up from the ground, circulated his qi, and adjusted his qi for a while before returning to normal. Seeing that the fur on Chen Yu's back had turned gray and its breath was very weak, he asked worriedly, "Chen Yu, how are you? Can you still hold on?" Chen Yu nodded and replied telepathically, "I'm fine, I can still hold on. Old Ji, this white bone monster is too strong. Don't expect to fight it head-on. Let's get out of here quickly." Ji Tianxing clenched the black dragon sword and glared coldly at the white bone giant. Then he ran forward with Chen Yu at full speed. The white bone giant immediately rushed forward and began to chase. It covered a distance of 100 meters in one step and caught up with Ji Tianxing and Chen Yu. It opened its mouth again and spat out a dark blue flame pillar. Boom! With a deafening bang, a huge pit was blasted open in the ground again, and dust flew everywhere. Ji Tianxing and Chen Yu were lucky enough to escape the flame pillar, but they were hit by the monstrous wave of fire and were sent flying again. Chen Yu's injuries were even more serious. The fur on its back had turned gray and its eyes were dim. Ji Tianxing's body was also corroded by the dark blue flame. A layer of gray appeared on his face and neck. Chapter 281. Ji Tianxing finally felt what it felt like to have one's lifespan devoured. The blue soul fire invaded his body silently, but it made him feel cold all over as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. Especially his soul, after being eroded by the blue soul fire, he only felt a bone-piercing chill. He could clearly feel that his vitality was rapidly draining away, and his body seemed to be getting older and decaying. Fortunately, he was still a teenager. After his lifespan was devoured, his appearance didn't change much. If he was a white-haired old man, he would not be far from death after having his lifespan devoured. Bleeding was not terrible. What was terrible was the blue soul fire, which was invisible and intangible, but could quietly take people's lives. Ji Tianxing was very afraid of the white bone giant, but he couldn't fight it head-on. He could only dodge its attacks and silently look for the white bone giant's weakness. Chen Yu's injury was so serious that it was difficult for it to fly, let alone fight with the white bone giant. Therefore, Ji Tianxing put it into the 100 treasures brocade bag and let it recuperate and restore its vitality. He was alone with the white bone giant, running wildly in the withered forest. He used his shadowless steps to increase his speed to the limit. His figure flashed in the forest and passed through layers of fog. Bang! 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 The white bone giant chased after him. Its feet made a big pit in the ground, and the vibration shook the area for thousands of meters. It seemed to be completely enraged. It kept opening its big white mouth and spitting out blue soul fire. Boom! Boom! Dull loud sounds kept bursting out, echoing in the dark sky. The blue soul fire pillars blasted out huge pits in the forest, splashing dust into the sky, and not dissipating for a long time. The violent shock waves, along with the surging blue soul fire waves, swept in all directions. Ji Tianqing's figure was sometimes submerged in the blue soul fire, and sometimes brushed past the monstrous fire waves. The situation was very dangerous, as if he was dancing on the tip of a knife. In just 100 breaths' time, the white bone giant had chased him for more than 10 miles and blasted out 10 soulfire pillars. He was blown away several times by the shockwaves, and his internal injuries were worsening. Blood flowed out of the corners of his mouth. However, these were only minor injuries. The more serious injury was that his vitality was being devoured by the blue soulfire, and his aura was getting weaker and weaker. His skin became grey and covered with a layer of death aura. Ji Tianqing didn't know how long he could hold on, and whether he could escape from this death forest alive. Before entering the hidden fog mountain range, he only was a dangerous place at every step, and only a few people could walk out alive. At this moment, he finally understood that the legends were not baseless. This dangerous place was even more terrifying than the rumors in the outside world. The blue soulfire from the white bone giant's eyes, but it's over 200 meters tall. I can't even hit its eyes. As he fled in a sorry state, avoiding the white bone giant's attacks, he anxiously tried to think of a way. I can't keep running away. Otherwise, I'll exhaust my life force sooner or later and die here. After a while, he was in a way. Gripping the black dragon sword tightly with both hands, he unleashed all of his power and fiercely slashed at the white bone giant's left foot. The white bone giant's feet were not far behind him, and one of its toes was almost as big as his. Bang! The 3-meter-long dazzling sword light, carrying the power to split the heavens and earth, fiercely slashed the white bone giant's left foot, exploding with a loud dull sound. The huge impact sent Ji Tianqing flying, and he fell more than 10 meters away. The white bone giant's left foot was cut in half, and countless broken bones flew out and scattered in all directions. Its body was too big, and its left foot was cut off. It could no longer support its balance. He staggered, and his tall body fell down. It was as if a mountain had collapsed, and he smashed into the ground. Boom! An earth-shattering sound exploded, reverberating throughout the forest. A huge crater was formed in the ground, and the ground was shaking violently. Ji Tianqing took this opportunity to perform his ultimate skill without hesitation. He activated 2 sword radiances and slashed at the white bone giant's eyes. Wind Thunder Strike. 2 dark golden sword radiances, one from the left and one from the right, attacked the white bone giant. The dazzling sword radiance mixed with the strong wind, forming a huge golden thunderbolt, and instantly struck its left eye. Boom! In the thunderous explosion, the white bone giant's left eye frame was shattered, and the blue flame in its eye became much dimmer. It was unable to let out a scream or roar. It struggled to get up and opened its mouth to spit out another blue pillar of fire. Ji Tianqing was already prepared for this. He had already retreated when it opened its mouth. Boom! The gigantic blue pillar of fire smashed into the ground, creating a trench that was hundreds of meters long. The violent energy mixed with the blue flame formed a monstrous fire wave, sweeping hundreds of meters of the ground. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing immediately frowned, and a hint of doubt flashed in his eyes. What's going on? I've already injured its left eye. Why is the blue soul fire not weakened at all? Could it be that the source of the blue soul fire is not its eyes? Realizing this, Ji Tianqing stared at the white bone giant with sharp eyes, carefully looking for the source of the blue soul fire. All of a sudden, he discovered a trace of a clue. There were 3 balls of blue flames in the white bone giant's body. 2 of them were its eyes. Although mysterious and cold, they were not powerful enough. The 3rd ball of blue flame was located at its throat. It was bigger than its eyes and more breathtaking. So it's here. Ji Tianqing was immediately shocked, and a sharp light flashed in his eyes. He did not hesitate to activate a sword radiance and use his trump card. Red Dragon Flash. The 2-meter-long golden sword radiance, with golden flames rising, was like a golden dragon phantom. With the power to destroy everything, it fiercely hit the white bone giant's throat. Crack! With a crisp breaking sound, the white bone at the white bone giant's throat was shattered by the red dragon flash, and a huge hole appeared. The golden dragon-shaped sword radiance passed through the hole and instantly hit the most dazzling and mysterious ball of flame. Bang! The ball of flame and the sword radiance of the red dragon flash exploded at the same time, turning into a surging wave of flame that burst out in all directions. The area, with a radius of hundreds of meters, was immediately covered by a monstrous fire, and Ji Tianxing's figure was also drowned. After a long time, the blue fire waves dissipated, and the forest returned to calm. The white bone giant was still lying on the ground, and there was no movement. The ball of flame at its throat was defeated, and it lost its support. The blue flames in its eyes also quickly dimmed and extinguished. Chapter 282. The forest calmed down and returned to its previous deathly silence. Ji Tianxing leaned on the black dragon's sword and leaned against a withered tree with a pale face, panting violently. Seeing that the white bone giant that was as tall as a mountain finally fell apart and turned into a pile of broken bones, he heaved a sigh of relief. Just now, when he was chased by the white bone giant for a short quarter of an hour, it was definitely the most dangerous moment. Fortunately, he clenched his teeth and endured it. At the critical moment of life and death, he remained calm and found the white bone giant's weakness. Only then could he defeat it and escape danger. Ji Tianxing leaned against the withered tree and panted for a while. He quickly took out healing pills from his interspatial ring and took them to heal the injuries of his internal organs. As for his lifespan that was devoured by the blue soul fire, it could not be healed or restored. At this time, the broken bones that were piled up like a mountain wriggled and made crashing sounds. Many broken bones gathered together and seemed to be piecing together to form a giant skeleton. Ji Tianxing knew that he could not stay here for long and had to leave as soon as possible. Although the white bone giant had been defeated by him, this place was dangerous and strange, and it was likely that more dangers would appear. He endured his injuries and exhausted body and quickly left the land of death, walking into the depths of the forest. For the next 2 hours, the journey was very smooth. Ji Tianxing passed through the sparse withered forest and crossed dozens of miles of withered leaves before he finally walked out of the forest of death. When he left the forest of death and stepped on a dark green grassland, he stopped to rest. Previously in the forest of death, his eyes were full of dark brown withered trees, withered yellow leaves, and grey fog that filled the sky, as well as grey bones. In that area, the world seemed to have lost its color, leaving only grey and pale. Because of this, life was decaying and quickly heading toward death. Ji Tianxing finally escaped from the land of death. When he saw the grassland and forest beside him, he felt as if he had returned to the human world from hell. He greedily breathed in the air that contained the fragrance of grass and leaves. He took pills and circulated his martial arts to refine them, silently recovering his exhausted real core and replenishing his exhausted physical strength. The surroundings were unusually quiet, so he quickly calmed down and focused on circulating his martial arts to heal his injuries. Unknowingly, 4 hours had passed. Ji Tianxing's internal injuries had recovered by 80 to 90%, and his consumed true essence had also been replenished. His grayish-white skin gradually returned to normal, and so did his mental state. Thus, he got up and left the grassland, continuing to move forward. He crossed the thick grass that reached his knees and entered a dimly lit forest. As he walked through the forest, he mumbled to himself, according to the markings on the map, "I'll enter a sea of fire after passing through the forest of death." But we're surrounded by dense forests. How could there be a sea of fire? He was full of doubts, and his sharp eyes looked around. As time passed, he went deeper and deeper into the forest. Soon, he saw some clues. The ground of the forest was originally moist and covered with trees and shrubs. The branches and leaves were dense and dense. The forest in front of them became thinner and thinner, and the ground became drier and drier. Many of the trees and shrubs in the forest had become bare, and the tree trunks were faintly charred. Ji Tianxing frowned as he looked ahead. His gaze passed through the layers of branches, and vaguely saw a dark red flame. He immediately realized that the so-called sea of fire was very likely in front of him. 15 minutes later, he walked out of the forest and came to a spacious pile of rocks. He had to stop in his tracks. Only then did he realize that the pile of rocks was on the peak of a 1,000-foot-tall mountain. A few steps forward was a 1,000-foot-tall cliff. The cliff was straight and steep, and below the cliff was a boundless dark red sea. After careful inspection, He realized that the vast sea was actually formed by red magma. This was a sea of magma. Dark red flames rose from the surface of the magma. They kept on surging and dancing, and rose dozens of meters high. Even though he was standing at the edge of the cliff, which was 1,000 feet away from the sea of magma, he could still feel the heat. However, he could still feel the scorching heat waves blowing at his face. Wisps of dark red flames rose from the bottom of the cliff and danced in the air. So this is the Sea of Fire, Ji Tianxing muttered softly with a complicated expression. His gaze became very solemn. He tried his best to look ahead and saw many towering mountains standing in the sea of magma. Every mountain was 1,000 feet tall, and there was no grass on the surface. There were only dark brown rocks that were covered in a thick layer of volcanic ash. Thick smoke constantly rose from the peaks of those mountains. Occasionally, a few dazzling flames would float out. Ji Tianxing observed for a moment and recognized that those mountains were volcanoes. From the various signs, those volcanoes were mostly active and could erupt at any time. Looking at this scene, he could not help but frown and smile bitterly. I didn't expect the hidden fog mountain to be so dangerous and harsh. It's far beyond my imagination. I just escaped from the forest of death, and now I have to cross the sea of magma. How am I going to cross such a vast sea of magma? The mountain under his feet was a lone peak. There was only the cliff and the sea of magma in front of him. There was no other way. He had already passed through the forest of death and arrived here. He could not give up and turn back. Since he could not retreat, he could only advance. There was no other way around the sea of magma. He could only fly in the sky to cross the sea of magma. After making up his mind, he communicated with his mind and called out to Chen Yu in his 100 treasures silk pouch. Unfortunately, Chen Yu did not respond to him even after he called out a few times. He understood that Chen Yu's injuries must have been too severe, and his vitality had been greatly damaged. He was still in a deep sleep and recuperating. Chen Yu could not fly with him, so he could only place his hopes on the little black dragon. Little black dragon, how are you doing? Can you fly across the sea of magma? He held the black dragon sword with both hands and asked with a solemn expression. The black dragon sword trembled slightly before it flew into the air and shone with a dazzling cold light. Swoosh! In the blink of an eye, the black dragon sword turned back into the little black dragon and revealed its huge dragon body. It circled around Ji Tianxing and slowly lowered its body. Ji Tianxing smiled and sat on the little black dragon's back. He said, "Let's go. Keep flying forward and cross the sea of magma." The little black dragon nodded and twisted its body to leave the cliff. It flew above the cliff and flew forward as fast as the wind. Ji Tianxing sat on the little black dragon's back and looked down at the sea of magma. He was secretly on his guard, even though he was thousands of feet away from the sea of magma. Chapter 283. 10,000 feet above the sea of lava, the little black dragon was leisurely flying through the air. Flames were rising from the surface of the sea below, releasing waves of heat that filled the sky. The little black dragon was a frost serpent dragon and hated fire energy the most. As it flew through the waves of heat, its speed was greatly reduced. It had no choice but to release an icy aura to protect itself and Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing was also sweating profusely from the heat, his face flushed red. When the little black dragon used its icy aura to envelop him, the invisible waves of heat were separated, and he felt much better. Unknowingly, 7 minutes passed. The little black dragon had flown 30 miles, but the sea of lava was still as vast as before. It was impossible to see the end. At this time, it was passing by a dark brown volcano that was 10,000 feet tall. Ji Tianxing tilted his head to observe the volcano, his expression turning grave. Thick smoke and wisps of flames were constantly rising from the mouth of the volcano. As he got closer, he could even hear the muffled rumbling coming from the mouth of the volcano. Halfway up the mountain, there were many cracks and holes from which crimson lava was constantly gushing out. The lava flowed along the walls of the volcano and into the sea of lava below. Could it be, this volcano is about to erupt? He tightly frowned, his heart filled with worry and anxiety. After all, the lava spewing out of the volcano when it erupted would be a world-destroying blow to him and the little black dragon. Little black dragon, increase your speed. Go a little faster. He patted the little black dragon's back and used his mind to urge it. The little black dragon immediately increased its speed, rushing forward with all its might. About a quarter of an hour later, it had flown more than 30 miles away and finally left the volcano behind. And at this time, that massive dark brown volcano finally erupted. Along with the deafening noises, dazzling flames suddenly spurted out from the crater of the volcano where the smoke was billowing. Within the flames was crimson lava, and around the flames was endless volcanic ash. In a flash, the entire volcano fiercely trembled, and the sea of lava within 50 miles began to churn. Dark red lava and volcanic ash soared into the sky like a mushroom cloud, covering the sky for dozens of miles. The sky above Ji Tianqing's head was covered by black ash, and the surrounding light also became gloomy. The power of a volcanic eruption is so terrifying. Don't tell me that we can't avoid it even though we're 30 miles away. He secretly clenched his fists, circulating his true essence at an extremely fast speed. A moment later, a scorching heat and shockwave came from behind him, instantly striking him and the little black dragon. Boom! There was a muffled thud as the little black dragon was sent tumbling through the air, almost knocked unconscious by the terrifying shockwave. It was severely injured on the spot, and its power was quickly fading away. It could not control its balance and could only be carried by the shockwave, falling into the magma sea ahead. An instant later, an incomparably scorching shockwave swept past it and Ji Tianqing, spreading even further away. The little black dragon, who had narrowly escaped death, endured the intense pain and injuries. He did his best to maintain his balance and prevent himself from falling. Ji Tianqing's clothes had already been charred by the scorching shockwave, and his internal organs had also been injured by the shock. But he clenched his teeth and silently placed his palms on the little black dragon's body, constantly pouring true essence into its body to help increase its strength. The little black dragon was still rapidly falling into the magma sea, getting closer and closer to the crimson surface. It struggled with all its might, doing its utmost to resist the force of the fall, wanting to fly back into the sky. It was only several hundred meters from the surface of the magma sea, about to plunge into it in the next moment. At this moment, the speed at which it was falling finally slowed. 300 meters above the surface of the magma sea, it finally stopped its fall and twisted its body to fly back into the sky. The scorching air and the wisps of flame floating in the air immediately singed Ji Tianqing's hair. But very quickly, the little black dragon carried him into the sky, far away from the magma sea. The scorching pain in his body vanished, and he inwardly sighed in relief, withdrawing his palms that had been imbued with true essence. But when he raised his head to look at the sky, he saw a vast expanse of volcanic ash pouring down. Not only was this dark brown volcanic ash mixed with large amounts of rock and magma, it was also terrifyingly hot. Alas, the little black dragon was heavily injured and had almost exhausted all its strength. Even though it saw the volcanic ash falling from the sky, it was powerless to escape. It opened its mouth and let out a dragon roar brimming with grief, indignation, and unwillingness, a hint of despair flashing through its eyes. At this moment of life and death, Ji Tianqing immediately placed his palms on its back, once more pouring true essence into its body. The little black dragon's body trembled as it was replenished with true essence, and it suddenly accelerated to the front. Thwish! Just when the volcanic ash was about to smash into it, it flew away like a bolt of lightning, narrowly avoiding this calamity. When it escaped the range of the volcanic ash, its surroundings suddenly became much brighter. President Ji Tian heaved a sigh of relief. His tense nerves finally relaxed. He turned to look behind him and saw a sight that he would never forget for the rest of his life. The black ash and magma that blotted out the sky poured into the magma ocean, splashing up huge waves of magma that were hundreds of meters high. Boom boom boom! A deafening sound reverberated in the air above the sea. The world was turbid, and everything within a radius of 100 li was covered in black ash. Other than scarlet flames and magma, nothing else could be seen. 10 seconds later, the magma and rock all fell into the sea of lava. The surface of the sea fiercely churned, creating massive waves 1,000 feet tall and bursting with flames. Ji Tianqing couldn't help but sigh in amazement at this astonishing sight. However, Although this earth-shattering scene was spectacular, it was also extremely dangerous and destructive. "Old G, let's get out of here." The little black dragon sent a telepathic message to him before accelerating forward. But at this moment, Ji Tianxing saw a dazzling flame fly out of the surging sea of lava behind him. Wooa! This massive scarlet flame charged out of the sea of lava and lunged at the little black dragon like a bolt of lightning. Ji Tianxing froze for a moment, his eyes fixed on this scarlet flame in astonishment. "That's a lava giant." He immediately saw that the crimson flame was a crimson giant that was 100 meters tall. This giant's body was condensed from dark red lava, and its appearance was extremely similar to a human's. It had 2 hands, 2 legs, a torso, and a head. Chapter 284. Before the flaming fists had even arrived, a blazing gust of wind blew at it. The little black dragon's body swayed from the violent gust of wind, and its flying speed also slowed down. At this critical moment, Ji Tianxing once more extended his palms, pouring vast amounts of true essence energy into the little black dragon's body. The little black dragon immediately erupted with all its strength, flying forward with all its might. Whoosh! The flaming fists of the lava giant brushed past it at a distance of 2 meters, finally missing. The little black dragon had luckily escaped the lava giant's attack and was fleeing forward with all its might. The lava giant, however, could not fly. It drew an arc in the sky before quickly plummeting, smashing into the lava sea with a splash. Massive waves immediately surged up on the surface of the sea, sending sparks flying everywhere. In a few short breaths, the flame giant charged out of the sea, running across the surface of the sea with its 2 legs. Its 2 massive feet did not sink as they stepped on the surface of the lava sea. Its speed was even faster than the little black dragon's. Thump, thump, thump. The lava giant chased at top speed, quickly catching up to the little black dragon. It was running across the surface of the sea while the little black dragon was flying 10,000 feet in the air. The two were very far apart. The lava giant jumped several times, but it could only reach a height of 500 to 600 meters. It simply could not reach the little black dragon. But when it reached a height of 500 meters, it waved its hands and threw out 2 balls of boiling lava at the little black dragon. The little black dragon was alarmed and hurriedly twisted its body to dodge. Thwish! Thwish! The 2 massive balls of lava whistled past it, whistling through the air. The little black dragon was badly frightened. It hurriedly increased its speed, flying even higher into the sky. The lava giant relentlessly chased after it, throwing out 1 ball of lava after another. The little black dragon desperately fled, dodging left and right to avoid the attacks of the lava balls. It had expended an enormous amount of energy and was quickly exhausted. Its flying speed was also rapidly decreasing. At this moment, the lava giant threw out another 2 balls of lava. The little black dragon barely managed to dodge one, but it was unable to dodge the other. Boom! It was hit by the huge magma ball on the spot, and its entire body was wrapped in red magma as it fell into the magma ocean below. The extremely high temperature emitted by the crimson lava broke through its icy aura and roasted its dragon body to the point where it emitted black smoke. It was almost burnt to a crisp. The incomparable pain caused the little black dragon to wretchedly scream. It was already heavily injured, and now that it was suffering such intense pain, it was immediately provoked into a frenzy, and desperately struggled to break free. Shua! It finally broke free from the magma and fell into the sea of magma. Just as it was about to fall into the sea of lava, it exhausted its last bit of strength and flew up into the sky. However, it did not fly very far before it fell from the sky and landed heavily on a pitch-black volcano. The little black dragon no longer had the strength to struggle. It lay motionless halfway up the mountain, unconscious. At the same time, Ji Tianxing was falling rapidly from mid-air towards the magma ocean below. When the little black dragon was hit by the magma ball, he was sent flying. Fortunately, he was not wrapped in the magma ball, so even if he was heavily injured, his life would not be in danger. Unfortunately, after flying several miles through the air, he would still fall into the magma ocean. He was only 300 meters above the magma ocean and would fall into it in the next moment. However, at this moment, an incomparably huge flaming palm appeared in front of him and caught him. It was the lava giant. He fell into the lava giant's hand, his body engulfed by the rising flames. The lava giant opened its mouth and immediately stuffed him into its mouth, swallowing him in one gulp. Ji Tianxing didn't even have the chance to struggle or resist before he was sent into the lava giant's throat and into its stomach. Bang! With a muffled thud, Ji Tianxing fell into a pool of red magma, his head spinning. The unparalleled heat and magma roasted his body, almost causing him to faint on the spot. However, the true essence in his body naturally erupted, forming a dark golden barrier of light that wrapped around him like an eggshell. It was precisely because of this true essence barrier that he had not been burned to ash by the magma. However, his true essence barrier could not last much longer. It was rapidly melting, becoming thinner and thinner. At this moment of life and death, his heart was filled with deep unwillingness and grief. Damn it! Am I going to die in the lava giant's stomach? He inwardly roared, an unparalleled will and desire to live bursting forth from the depths of his soul. His entire body lit up with a resplendent golden light. Whoosh! The golden sword embryo in his body flew out of his body and floated above his head. Buzz! Buzz buzz! The golden sword embryo fiercely trembled and buzzed. In the blink of an eye, it grew to over 2 meters long, transforming into a giant golden sword. The giant sword lit up with a resplendent golden light, forming an oval-shaped barrier that firmly protected Ji Tianxing. Furthermore, the giant sword released an invisible devouring power that swept in all directions. Whoosh 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 whoosh. The red magma and the flames floating in the air were all swept up by the invisible devouring power and surged toward the giant golden sword. Ji Tianxing raised his head to look at the giant golden sword. He saw that it was like a whirlpool, crazily devouring the magma and flames around it. He stood within the golden barrier and was not eroded by the magma and flames at all. However, he could clearly feel that after the giant golden sword devoured the magma and flames, its power was rapidly increasing. His body also faintly felt a burning sensation, like a warm stream of water flowing in his meridians, rapidly refining one acupoint after another. The sudden change stunned him for a moment. His eyes were filled with shock and astonishment. He had never imagined that his sword embryo would be so miraculous. Not only did it save his life at the critical moment of life and death, it could even devour magma and flames. After 2 breaths, he calmed down and looked around with keen eyes. He was in the lava giant's stomach. There was red magma and flames in all directions, and there were black reefs in some places. As the giant golden sword continued to devour the magma and flames, the magma in the surroundings started to churn and quickly disappeared. In a short span of time, the magma in the surroundings had decreased by more than half, revealing large patches of black reefs. The giant golden sword also underwent a slight change. Its size and length did not change, but the golden light faintly revealed a tinge of dark red. Ji Tianxing saw the changes in the sword embryo and his face was filled with joy. Chapter 285. That feeling was similar to the feeling he had for metal elemental true origin and power. He immediately understood that after the sword embryo swallowed the lava and flames, it was gradually merging with the power of fire. The burning sensation in his body was the power of fire that was rapidly tempering his acupuncture points. In a short period of time, 2 acupuncture points in his 4th sword vein were completely tempered by the power of fire. His ability had also quietly increased by 20%, and he was steadily advancing towards the 5th level of the mystic comprehending realm. Ji Tianxing still did not understand why the sword embryo had such a miraculous effect and change. But he knew that now was the best time to increase his ability. He quickly sat cross-legged in the golden shield and concentrated on circulating his energy to control the power of fire in his body to continue tempering his acupuncture points. 15 minutes later, the tempering of the 3rd acupuncture point was completed. 30 minutes later, the tempering of the 4th acupuncture point was completed. 1 hour later, the tempering of the 5th acupuncture point was completed. As time passed, Ji Tianxing's ability was rapidly increasing. The magma and flames in the magma giant's stomach were quickly devoured. Up, down, left, right, in all directions, not a single flame could be seen. Not even a drop of lava could be found. Its stomach was empty, and only a shell formed by a layer of black reefs was left. The lava and flames were swallowed up, causing the lava giant's power to rapidly decrease. Cracks continuously appeared on its body. It roared and howled crazily, rolling around in pain in the sea of lava. It did not understand what was happening, but it instinctively struggled and opened its mouth to swallow the lava to replenish its lost power. But all the lava it swallowed was swallowed up by Ji Tianxing's sword embryo. Soon, 6 hours had passed. The lava giant was still struggling in the sea of lava, swallowing a large amount of lava with all its might. But the speed at which it swallowed the lava was obviously much slower than the sword embryo. At this moment, its entire body had turned into black reefs. Without the lava and flames, it could no longer be called a lava giant. Its gigantic body was covered in dense cracks. The black reefs were quickly crumbling and falling into the magma ocean with a series of plopping sounds. 10 hours later, more than half of its body had crumbled, leaving only half of its body and half of its leg. 1 day later, its body had completely crumbled, turning into a pile of shattered black reefs that sank into the sea of lava. The lava giant had completely disappeared and no longer existed. A huge golden sword appeared in the sea of lava, releasing an invisible devouring power that continued to swallow the sea of lava and flames. The golden light from the huge sword formed a circular shield that protected Ji Tianxing firmly. Ji Tianxing maintained his cross-legged posture with his eyes closed. He was still cultivating to increase his ability. 2 days later, more than half of the vast sea of lava was swallowed. The sea of lava had also decreased by several hundred meters. 5 days later, the huge sword had devoured the entire sea of lava to lava. The surroundings had turned into a dark brown open space, with black reefs piled up like mountains everywhere. Even the scattered volcanoes had become deathly silent, turning into ice-cold black stone mountains. 5 days ago, this area was still a sea of fire, a world of lava and flames. Now, there was no longer any light in this area. It had become a pitch-black, gloomy, and cold world. The huge golden sword that was suspended in mid-air changed color. It had turned into a mixture of gold and red. Swoosh! The golden shield disappeared. The huge golden sword also shrunk into a small, golden-red sword. It flew back into Ji Tianxing's body and landed at the black hole in his dantian. Ji Tianxing sensed something. He ended his cultivation and opened his eyes. In just 5 days, his ability had increased from level 4 to level 5 of the mystic comprehending stage. Moreover, he had been using the power of fire to refine the 9 sword veins again. After the second refinement, the sword veins had become more resilient and powerful. It also gave him a deeper foundation and potential. He used his spiritual consciousness to look inside his body. He saw the sword embryo that was suspended in his dantian. It was faintly emitting a surging, scorching power of flames. Without a doubt, he had already obtained a second natal attribute and had successfully mastered the power of flames. He withdrew his spiritual consciousness from the sword embryo and revealed a gratified smile. Everyone only has one innate attribute. They cultivate one of the 5 elemental powers. Only those who have reached the heavenly origin realm can master the power of the 5 elements. My natal attribute is metal. Now that the sword embryo has devoured the lava, it has allowed me to master the power of flames at the mystic comprehending stage. This is a miracle. He muttered to himself and lowered his head to look at his left hand. In the center of his left palm, there was a scarlet flame imprint. He could clearly feel that his left hand had undergone a miraculous change. With a thought, he activated his true core power and gathered it on his left hand. Instantly, his entire left arm became as red as fire, as if it was formed from magma. He could not wait to test the power of his left hand. He stretched out his left arm and slapped forward. Scarlet flames shot out from his palm and turned into a gigantic flaming light pillar. It hit a volcano that was 10 miles away. Bang! With a deafening sound, the volcano, which was thousands of feet tall, was broken in half by the flaming light pillar. Half of the volcano collapsed and exploded, turning into rubble that scattered all over the sky. Ji Tianxing was stunned. He stared at the rubble and exclaimed in disbelief, "Oh my God! How could it be so powerful?" As soon as he finished speaking, the voice of the sword soul, Burial of Heaven, rang in his mind. "Kid, You used up 30% of your true scarlet flame fire for this palm strike. If you try 2 more times and use up all your true red flame fire, you can slowly cultivate and accumulate. The voice of the burial of heaven was low and cold, but there was a hint of mockery in his tone. Ji Tianxing suddenly realized that the mutation of the sword embryo must have something to do with the burial of heaven. He quickly dispersed the power in his left hand and let his left arm return to normal. He communicated with the burial of heaven telepathically. Senior burial of heaven, thank you for your help and reminder. It was just a small matter. The burial of heaven said indifferently, the true red flame fire is sealed in your left hand. Its power is too strong and is not something you can control now. Only if you continue to improve your strength can you truly unleash the power of the true red flame fire. Ji Tianxing nodded and said, I understand. Then, the sword soul, burial of heaven, did not say anything else. Ji Tianxing suppressed the excitement and surprise in his heart. He looked around at the reefs and open space and began to look for the little black dragon. Chapter 286. Although the little black dragon managed to keep its life, its injuries were too severe. It would take a long time to recover. Ji Tianxing's heart sank as he looked at the black dragon's pitiful appearance, which was covered in scars. He infused 20% of his energy into the little black dragon and fed it a few healing pills before putting it into the 100 treasures brocade pouch to let it rest. Then, he awakened Qian Yu from the 100 treasures brocade pouch. Earlier in the Forest of Death, Qian Yu had suffered heavy injuries and had a large amount of its lifespan devoured by the blue soul fire. After a few days of deep sleep and recuperation, its injuries had already recovered, and its fur had also regained its icy blue color. Whoosh! With a flash of light, Qian Yu flew out of the 100 treasures brocade pouch and appeared in front of Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing jumped onto its back and said, Qian Yu, keep going forward. Qian Yu flapped its wings and flew into the sky. As it flew forward, it observed its surroundings. The vast expanse of black land and black stone mountains were very strange. Its heart was filled with doubts. It could not help but ask Ji Tianxing where this place was and what had happened earlier. Ji Tianxing smiled faintly and briefly recounted the events that had transpired. An hour later, Qian Yu carried Ji Tianxing away from the vast sea of lava and entered a majestic mountain range. The mountain wall on the side of the sea of magma was completely barren, showing a scorched black color. On the other side of the mountain range, there was a lush primitive forest full of towering trees and exotic flowers. Qian Yu flew for more than 200 miles, crossed the vast primitive forest, and entered another region. At this time, it was flying above a surging river. The river, which was hundreds of meters wide, was located between 2 black mountain ranges. The river water was turbulent and flowed to an unknown direction. On both sides of the river were steep cliffs. The cliffs were as black as ink, and there were many dark caves. Qian Yu flew in the opposite direction of the river. Ji Tianxing looked at the cliffs on both sides, curious about the numerous caves. According to the markings on the map, the 10,000 Crow Mountain is just past the Sea of Fire. There is a large river in the 10,000 Crow Mountain. If I follow the river upstream and find the source of the river, I will be able to reach the full moon lake. He secretly recalled the information marked on the map, and his heart was filled with anticipation. As long as he passed through the 10,000 Crow Mountain range, he would reach the destination and enter the full moon lake. He prayed silently in his heart that the following journey would be smooth and wouldn't be as dangerous as the Forest of Death and the Sea of Flames. However, it seemed that his prayers had backfired. On the cliff to the left of the river, a large flock of blackbirds suddenly flew out from a dark cave, shooting over like arrows. The flock of blackbirds was like a large black cloud, bringing with it a fierce gust of wind. In the blink of an eye, they had reached Qian Yu. Ji Tianxing could see clearly that the blackbirds were 1 meter long. Their bodies were as black as ink, and their feathers were hard and neat. They had sharp beaks and sharp claws. These blackbirds looked like crows, but they were several times larger than normal crows. Their strength and attack were also much stronger. He immediately recognized that these blackbirds were the middle-rank demonic beasts, the reverse-boned black crows. A reverse-boned black crow's strength was only equivalent to a LV4 or 5 true element realm martial artist. It was no threat to him and Qian Yu. However, hundreds of reverse-boned black crows attacked together. Their attack and power were terrifying, and they couldn't help but be wary. Oh no! It's the reverse-boned black crows. Qian Yu, be careful. Ji Tianxing's face immediately turned cold, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Without hesitation, he activated 3 sword rays and slashed at the flock of reverse-boned black crows. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The 3 sword rays immediately split into 9, and the sky was filled with sword rays. Within 5 breaths of time, the 3 sword rays had stabbed thousands of times. With the sound of the sword rays piercing through the air, the black cloud formed by the reverse-boned black crows was immediately enveloped by the sword rays. At least hundreds of reverse-boned black crows were killed on the spot by the sharp sword rays, and were chopped into pieces. The broken bodies of the black crows splattered black blood all over the sky and sprinkled down into the river below. Qian Yu was already prepared. He opened his mouth and spat out a dozen icy blue light blades, which shot at the flock of crows like sharp arrows. Immediately, a dozen reverse-boned black crows were killed, and their bodies fell from the sky into the river below. In the blink of an eye, the flock of black crows were all killed, leaving only a pile of black feathers floating in the air. Ha ha, a flock of disgusting stinky crows, how dare you attack us? You're courting death. Qian Yu sneered proudly and continued to fly forward. Ji Tianxing's expression was not relaxed at all. His eyes became more and more serious. Qian Yu, don't be careless. We've just killed more than 100 reverse-boned black crows. The smell of blood and the killing will definitely attract more black crows to attack us. Sure enough, as soon as his voice fell, on the cliffs on both sides of the river, 4 black clouds immediately rushed out of the cave. There were 100 or 200 reverse-boned black crows in each of the black clouds. Like arrows released from a bow, they shot toward Ji Tianxing and Qian Yu, opening their mouths and letting out ear-piercing screeches. Caw, caw, caw. One after another, the strange screeches immediately joined together, echoing between the 2 cliffs. Ji Tianxing and Qian Yu heard the ear-piercing screeches and felt dizzy. Their vision was a little blurry, and their heads were splitting. Taking advantage of this opportunity, hundreds of reverse-boned black crows rushed over from all directions, stretching out their sharp beaks and sharp claws, and attacked Qian Yu and Ji Tianxing from all sides. Qian Yu hurriedly flapped his wings and sped forward, trying to get rid of the flock of crows. In order to break out of the encirclement, he desperately waved his front claws, shooting out icy blue light all over the sky, and launched a counterattack. At the same time, it immediately reminded Ji Tianxing, old Ji, the cries of these reverse-boned black crows are very strange, and they can release a special sound wave attack. Ji Tianxing also realized this, so he immediately used his right hand's index and middle fingers to hit 4 acupoints on his body with bang 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 sounds. After the 4 acupoints were sealed, his hearing was temporarily sealed. He was like a deaf person, unable to hear anything. The strange cries of the hundreds of black crows and the formless soundwave attack were no longer a threat to him. He immediately activated several golden-red sword auras, which danced and shuttled back and forth in the surroundings, desperately trying to kill those reverse-boned black crows. Swish, swish. The area within a radius of 10 meters was immediately covered by the golden-red sword shadows. All the black crows that rushed into the sword light were cut into pieces by the sword light, turning into countless pieces that fell from the sky. Chapter 287. Tens of thousands of reverse-boned black crows covered the sky like a large black cloud. Ji Tianxing and Qian Yu's silhouettes were submerged in the sea of crows as they were besieged by countless black crows. Although they fought back desperately and tried their best to block the attacks of the crows, they could not stop them at all. Qian Yu was bigger and became the main target of the crows. In a short time, he was bitten by the sharp beaks and claws of the crows. His body was covered in blood and his ice blue feathers kept falling off. Ah! Damn you stinky crows! How dare you peck my feathers? Get out of my way! Qian Yu roared angrily and waved his claws to attack the crows in front of him. Whoosh whoosh whoosh! Rays of ice blue brilliance pierced through countless black crows like arrows and tore them to pieces. However, compared to the flock of crows that blotted out the sky, its attack was like a drop in the bucket. It was insignificant. The number of black crows that came from all directions did not decrease. Instead, there were more and more of them. Many black crows were killed and torn to shreds, turning into filthy blood and minced meat that filled the sky, falling down from the sky. Many reverse-boned black crows fought for food. They opened their sharp beaks and devoured the flesh of their own kind. Under the stimulation of blood and death, the crows became more and more violent and bloodthirsty. They attacked Ji Tianxing and Qian Yu even more desperately. Qian Yu screamed as he was pecked by the crows. Ji Tianxing was also a little embarrassed and his face was solemn. Seeing that the crows were getting denser and denser, more and more crows were rushing out of the caves on both sides of the cliff. Ji Tianxing frowned and thought to himself, ants can kill an elephant with so many reverse-boned black crows. They will tear me and Qian Yu to pieces soon. This can't go on. I have to find a way to get rid of the crows. He made up his mind and slowly raised his left hand. He gathered his power in his left hand. Instantly, his entire left arm became as red as fire, like a magma arm. Red flames also surged in the center of his left palm. Damn crows, go to hell. He suddenly raised his left palm and slammed it forward. A giant flaming palm formed from crimson flames appeared in front of him out of nowhere and slammed towards the flock of black crows. This giant flaming palm was at least 20 meters wide and 30 meters long. It was terrifyingly huge. Boom! At that moment, at least several hundred reverse-boned black crows were struck by the giant flaming palm on the spot, exploding in the fierce crimson fire and turning into black charcoal. A gap was immediately blasted open in the black clouds that covered the sky. Hundreds of pieces of black charcoal fell like dumplings and crashed into the surging river. Ji Tianxing killed hundreds of black crows with a single palm strike, but he didn't feel the slightest bit of excitement. He waved his left palm again, controlling the giant flaming palm and sweeping it towards the crows beside him. The giant crimson flaming palm spewed out crimson flames that blotted out the sky and covered an area of 100 meters. Instantly, another few hundred reverse-boned black crows were killed on the spot. They turned into pieces of charcoal and fell into the river with a plop. When Qian Yu saw this scene, his eyes were filled with shock and astonishment. While releasing icy light blades to kill the crows, he asked Ji Tianxing telepathically, "Old Ji, you can actually control the power of fire?" "Oh my god, when did you control fire?" Previously, Ji Tianxing had briefly told him about the magma ocean, but he didn't mention that he could control the power of fire after swallowing the magma ocean. Ji Tianxing smiled silently and didn't explain anything. He continued to wave his left hand and slammed it towards the crows in all directions. Boom boom boom! The giant flaming palm flew up and down, shooting out flames that blotted out the sky and bombarding the reverse-boned black crows. In the short span of 100 breaths, tens of thousands of reverse-boned black crows were killed by the giant flaming palm and turned into charcoal that fell into the river. Plop 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 sounds were endless as the number of black crows in the sky rapidly decreased. After a quarter of an hour, the sky finally cleared up. All the crows had been killed by Ji Tianxing. In the caves on both sides of the cliff, there were still flocks of black crows circling around the cave entrance, making ear-piercing and unpleasant sounds. However, they could only circle around the cave entrance and look at Qian Yu and Ji Tianxing from afar, not daring to attack anymore. Qian Yu and Ji Tianxing were out of danger and sped up to fly forward. The river in front of them turned a bend. The bend was very wide and the water flow was relatively slow. On both sides of the river, there were huge black stones standing tall. Qian Yu flew over the bend in the river, his body surging with an icy blue brilliance, silently healing his injuries. At this moment, in the wide bend of the river below, a huge whirlpool suddenly appeared. The dark vortex spun at an extremely fast speed and was rapidly expanding, like a huge black abyss, looking both mysterious and terrifying. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianxing immediately frowned and shouted in a deep voice, "Qian Yu, watch out!" As soon as his voice fell, a huge black shadow emerged from the deep vortex and flew up to the sky as fast as lightning. Swoosh! When the huge black shadow broke the surface of the water and rushed out of the vortex, it brought up huge waves and water splashes, making a deafening sound. In just a moment, Ji Tianxing saw clearly that the huge black shadow was actually a huge snake that was hundreds of meters long. The giant snake's body was pitch black and covered with fine scales that flickered with a cold light. Its body was at least 400 meters long. The upper half of its body was standing in the air, and its tail was still hidden in the huge vortex. When Ji Tianxing saw its appearance, his pupils suddenly shrank and a touch of surprise flashed in his eyes. This was because the pitch-black snake actually had 9 heads. Each snake head was basically the same size, and they were all shining with a cold light. They opened their bloody mouths and kept spitting out their scarlet tongues. What demonic beast is this? Its body is so huge, and it has 9 heads. Could this be the legendary 9-headed snake? Ji Tianxing looked at the 9-headed snake seriously and secretly clenched his fists. His body was constantly accumulating vital core. Qian Yu also stopped in time and floated in the air, staring at the 9-headed snake carefully. The 9-headed snake stood upright on the surface of the river, and its 9 pairs of dark green eyes stared at Qian Yu and Ji Tianxing, revealing a cold and bloodthirsty look in its eyes. There was no doubt that this turbulent river was its territory. Just now, when Ji Tianxing was fighting with countless reverse-boned black crows, it was awakened from hiding at the bottom of the river. Qian Yu and the 9-headed snake were 200 meters apart, facing each other silently. No one attacked first, as if the air had frozen. Chapter 288. The 9-headed snake's 9 flat mouths opened and closed silently, revealing sharp, dark yellow fangs. Drops of dark green saliva dripped from the corners of its mouth and turned into green smoke in the air, quietly spreading. Its 9 pairs of gloomy and cold eyes stared at Qian Yu and Ji Tianxing, and its aura became colder and colder. It was not in a hurry to attack immediately. It had enough patience to wait for Qian Yu and Ji Tianxing to be poisoned, paralyzed, and festered. At that time, it would be able to effortlessly catch its prey and enjoy its dinner to its heart's content. Ji Tianxing furrowed his brows as a cold glint flashed in his eyes. He did not show it on his face, but he secretly accumulated a vast amount of vital core and suddenly launched an attack. Gale Thunder Strike! He shouted in a low voice, and 2 golden sword rays slashed at the hydra from the left and right. The 2 golden sword rays were 2 meters long, and with a fierce and domineering power, they arrived in front of the hydra in an instant. The 9-headed snake immediately reacted. It shrank its body and tilted its 9 heads in an attempt to dodge the sword light. However, its body was too big, and there were too many heads and necks. In the end, it could not dodge the attack. Kaboom! The dazzling golden light mixed with the violent wind and turned into a powerful golden thunderbolt, which fiercely hit one of the hydra's necks. A deafening sound echoed between the cliffs on both sides. The golden thunderbolt exploded with a loud bang, exploding into golden fragments that filled the sky and scattered into the river. There was a long and narrow white mark on the hydra's neck, and dozens of palm-sized snake scales were cut off. However, it was only slightly injured, and its flesh and bones were not damaged at all. Only a trace of blood seeped out of the wound. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing's face immediately became gloomy, and his eyes became very serious. Qian Yu also widened his eyes anxiously, and hurriedly sent a voice transmission to Ji Tianxing. "Old Ji, we are in big trouble now. This hydra is a great demon of the origin core stage. Since we can't beat them, let's think of a way to escape." Its eyes rolled around as it racked its brains to think of a solution. The 9-headed serpent was enraged. It opened its bloody mouth and let out a deep roar, spewing out tens of balls of dark green venom towards Ji Tianxing and Qian Yu. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing made a prompt decision and shouted, "Qian Yu, retreat quickly, let's go back to the 1,000-Crow Mountain." Qian Yu flapped his wings with all his might and retreated as fast as he could, narrowly avoiding the venom that filled the sky. It turned around and fled towards the 10,000-Crow Mountain as it asked anxiously, "Old Ji, are you crazy? It wasn't easy for us to escape from the 10,000-Crow Mountain. If we go back now, wouldn't that be suicide? One hydra is enough of a headache for us. If we are besieged by those damn stinky crows later, both of us will be torn to pieces." Ji Tianxing said with a serious face, "Qian Yu, I don't have time to explain so much. Just do as I say. If we want to kill this hydra, this is the only way. Qian Yu obviously believed him and did not ask any more questions as it flew towards the 10,000 Crow Mountain with all its might. The Hydra twisted its huge body and chased after them at lightning speed. It also opened its mouth and spat out black water arrows at Qian Yu and Ji Tianxing. Qian Yu dodged with all its might, its body flashing left and right as it narrowly dodged the water arrows. Not long after, it carried Ji Tianxing back to the 10,000 Crow Mountain and returned to the place where they fought with the crows. There was not a single black crow in the sky as all the black crows had returned to the caves on the cliff. At this time, the Hydra was only a few dozen meters away from Qian Yu. At this critical moment, Ji Tianxing used all his might to unleash the Flying Star Sword technique and a huge golden sword aura appeared. This sword aura was 3 meters long and contained a sharp sword will and power. Originally, he wanted to use the Crimson Dragon Flash as this sword aura was the maximum power that he could unleash. However, he then channeled the power in his left hand and his entire arm immediately turned crimson red like magma. When he used the Scarlet Flame True Fire, the 3-meter-long golden sword beam immediately expanded violently, growing to a full 10 meters long. The huge sword aura was covered in blazing flames as it emitted an extremely violent and domineering aura. Crimson Dragon Flash. Ji Tianxing did not hesitate any longer as he let out a low growl filled with murderous intent and directed the flaming sword aura towards the Hydra. At that moment, the crimson sword aura burst forth with monstrous flames and formed a lifelike crimson fire dragon shadow. This sword aura had become the real Crimson Dragon Flash and its power had reached an extremely terrifying level. Swoosh! In just an instant, the Crimson Dragon Flash had traveled a few dozen meters and landed heavily on one of the Hydra's necks. With a muffled bang, the Hydra's neck and head were engulfed in flames. Its thick and sturdy neck was actually severed on the spot by the Crimson Dragon Flash and fell into the surging river along with its head. The severed neck revealed eerie white bones as dark red blood gushed out like a torrential downpour in the sky. An extremely foul stench of blood immediately spread over the river. The Hydra's neck and head had been severed and it immediately roared in agony as it furiously swung its huge body towards Qian Yu. Qian Yu was already prepared as he hurriedly tried to escape and narrowly avoided the Hydra's attack. The Hydra was even more enraged as it thrashed wildly in the surging river. It twisted its huge snake tail and slapped out huge waves. Even the cliffs on the left and right were cracked by the enormous snake tail, causing countless huge rocks to fall out of them. The crows that were hiding in the cave were alerted. They smelled the thick stench of blood in the air and rushed out of the cave to attack the Hydra. Suddenly, dozens of black clouds flew out from all directions and covered the sky. Tens of thousands of reverse-boned black crows circled around the Hydra as they let out ear-piercing screeches and pecked at its wounds. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing hurriedly told Qian Yu to use this opportunity to escape. Qian Yu immediately understood and turned into a streak of icy blue light as it flew upstream at top speed. In just 30 seconds, it and Ji Tianxing had escaped from the crow's encirclement and were finally out of danger. Ji Tianxing turned his head and looked behind him. He saw that the 9-headed snake was still thrashing violently in the river, constantly twisting and struggling. Around the 9-headed snake, there were at least tens of thousands of black crows, completely covering the sky above the river. Tens of thousands of black crows attacked and pecked at the Hydra as blood and flesh splattered everywhere. Chapter 289. The previously ferocious and menacing 9-headed snake was soon devoured by tens of thousands of reverse-boned black crows. There wasn't even a bit of flesh left on the white skeleton of the snake. The reverse-boned black crows were indeed bloodthirsty and ferocious. When the 9-headed snake skeleton fell into the river, the crows that covered the sky gradually dispersed and returned to their caves on the cliff. Soon, Qian Yu carried Ji Tianxing across the wide bend of the river and disappeared above the river. After that, the rest of the journey was smooth and safe. No accidents happened. After about 4 hours, Ji Tianxing and Qian Yu finally arrived at the source of the river. A majestic mountain that was more than 4,000 meters tall stood at the end of the river. A few golden rays of the setting sun shone through the layers of fog in the sky and shone on the mountain, causing the mountain to be covered in a layer of faint golden light. It looked even more mysterious and majestic. There was a huge black hole at the foot of the mountain. The surging river water was gushing out of the black hole. Ji Tianxing and Qian Yu crossed the majestic mountain and continued to fly forward. He looked ahead with a burning gaze, and a look of anticipation appeared on his face. This is great. We've finally left the Thousand Ravens mountain area and are about to enter the full moon lake. He thought to himself, what is the full moon lake like? How am I going to find clues about the heavenly star bead in the lake? Just as he was thinking, Qian Yu carried him across the majestic mountain. A huge wasteland appeared in front of them. The ground was dark yellow and gave off a barren and lonely aura. Ji Tianxing looked down from the sky and saw that the wasteland was covered in dark yellow sand. Many huge rocks were scattered around and there was almost no greenery or plants. Most of the huge rocks were buried by the yellow sand. The exposed parts were severely weathered and rough. As gusts of wind blew across the wasteland, the yellow sand on the ground was swept up into the sky. The huge rocks were also peeled off and scattered in the sand. Further away in the wasteland, huge gullies were formed on the ground. They were densely connected like a spider web. Even if the wind blew sand into the sky, it would not be able to fill up the crisscrossing ravines. This area was located between a desert and a wasteland. Not only was it dry, but it was also devoid of life. It only gave off an ancient aura. Ji Tianxing frowned when he saw the boundless wasteland. As he looked around, he muttered to himself in confusion, according to the markings on the map, this should be the full moon lake. But there isn't even a drop of water here. How can there be a lake? His heart was filled with doubt and disbelief. He circled above the wasteland for an entire day, carefully observing the terrain around the wasteland. He even took out a map and compared it several times. In the end, he had no choice but to admit that this was indeed Full Moon Lake. However, for some unknown reason, the Full Moon Lake had disappeared or dried up, turning into a wasteland full of crack. This result made Ji Tianxing's heart a little heavy, and he frowned. He had risked his life to pass through the forest of death, the sea of fire, and the Raven Mountain. He had gone through so much to reach this place. How could he give up so easily? Even if the Full Moon Lake had disappeared and turned into a vast wasteland, he would continue to investigate and find clues about the heavenly star bead. He rode Qian Yu and continued to fly in the wasteland. He checked the situation along the way, not letting go of any clues. When he entered the depths of the wasteland, the wind in the sky became more and more violent, rolling up the sand and dust on the ground and covering the sun. He and Qian Yu endured the sandstorms and hurricanes and persevered through the wasteland, looking for any clues that might exist. Time flew by. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days passed by quickly. In 3 days, Ji Tianxing and Qian Yu flew around the wasteland more than a dozen times, almost going to every corner of the wasteland. Qian Yu's strength had been exhausted. He could only shrink back to the size of a kitten and go back to sleep in the 100 treasures brocade pouch. Ji Tianxing trekked alone in the wasteland. He walked for an entire day and continued to search for clues. He braved the sandstorms and hurricanes and moved forward. His whole body was covered with sand and dust, almost turning him into a native. Even so, he was still unwilling to give up. There was still a glimmer of hope in his heart. Soon, the 4th day passed. Ji Tianxing still could not find any clues. The disappointment in his heart grew stronger and stronger. He could not help but wonder if there was a problem with the clues in the mysterious ancient book or the map of the hidden Fog Mountain range. After searching for 4 days without sleep and rest, he was almost exhausted. He was extremely tired and sleepy. That night, he found a small cave in the wasteland. He hid in the cave to avoid the sandstorm and recuperated to recover his strength. After a long night, at dawn, the raging hurricanes and sandstorms gradually stopped. The whistling of the wind outside the cave gradually disappeared. The sand that covered the sky also gradually dissipated. The sky gradually became clear and the wasteland quieted down. When dawn came, Ji Tianxing finished his cultivation. After a night of recuperation, he was full of energy again. Seeing that the sky outside the cave was bright and the sandstorm had stopped, he could not help but smile with relief. Great, the sandstorm that lasted for a few days and nights has finally stopped. He quickly walked out of the cave and prepared to continue his journey and search for clues. However, When he walked to the entrance of the cave, he suddenly showed a surprised expression. The entrance of the cave was originally half buried by the sand. At that moment, the sand at the entrance of the cave had disappeared, revealing a large piece of dark brown rock. The sand outside the cave had sunk by more than 30 meters. Ji Tianxing leaped from the entrance of the cave. He drew an arc in the air and landed on the yellow sand below. He subconsciously turned around and looked at the entrance of the cave. He was stunned on the spot. He saw an ancient black stone statue that was dozens of meters tall standing in front of him. This black stone statue had experienced the vicissitudes of life for an unknown number of years. The surface had long been eroded by the wind and frost, and countless stone chips had been peeled off. The stone statue was mostly buried by the sand, and only the upper half of the statue was exposed. He could vaguely see that it was a strangely shaped and incomparably ferocious demon beast. Ji Tianxing stared at the stone statue for a long time and finally recognized the giant beast carved on the stone statue. It seemed to be the ancient legendary beast Lu Wu. The cave he rested in last night was actually the mouth of Lu Wu. It seems that this stone statue was previously buried in the sand and could not see the light of day. The raging sandstorm blew away the sand that buried the stone statue, revealing it. Chapter 290. Ji Tianxing circled Lu Wu several times and carefully examined it, but he could not find any clues. Thus, he climbed onto Lu Wu's body and began to examine it at close range. Mysterious patterns had been carved into the stone sculpture, but the stone sculpture had been severely weathered and its surface was covered in cracks. Ji Tianxing vaguely sensed that there was some mystery to this stone sculpture, and it seemed to contain the qi of a formation. But this was only his conjecture and could not be verified for the time being. He climbed onto Lu Wu's head and stood at the highest point to examine his surroundings. Suddenly, he caught sight of a black figure standing in the desert a dozen or so kilometers away. He focused his attention and observed for a moment. Then, he saw that the black figure seemed to be an ancient stone statue. "There's actually more than one stone sculpture here," he muttered in a low voice, and a look of anticipation surged in his eyes. Soon after, Ji Tianxing left Lu Wu's stone sculpture and dashed through the yellow sand for more than 10 li before finally arriving at another black stone sculpture. This black stone sculpture had also been mostly buried by the sand, leaving only the upper half of its 50-some meters tall body exposed. The surface of the stone sculpture was mottled with age, covered in cracks and traces of weathering. Even some of the mysterious patterns and symbols were blurry and indistinct. Furthermore, this stone sculpture was also of an ancient beast. It was a ferocious-looking giant bird that was spreading its wings and soaring in the sky. Ji Tianxing could vaguely make out that this was a dragon hawk. Alas, a large chunk of the stone sculpture was damaged, and the beast was missing a head. After examining the dragon hawk for a while, he came to the same conclusion as before. The stone sculpture was too ancient and heavily weathered. Even if there were formation patterns and symbols on it, they could no longer be recognized. Ji Tianxing began to speculate. Was there some connection between this dragon hawk and the Lu Wu sculpture 10-some li away? His brow furrowed in thought for a few moments, and then he began to examine the surrounding desert. Soon, he saw another black stone statue in the desert to the southwest, about a dozen kilometers away from him. "There's actually a third stone sculpture." Ji Tianxing was a little surprised. He quickly jumped down from the back of the dragon hawk stone sculpture and rushed towards the southwest. A moment later, he arrived in front of the third stone statue. After close observation for a while, he recognized that this stone sculpture was also an ancient beast. It was the legendary three-legged golden crow. The situation of the golden crow statue was basically the same as the previous two statues. Not only was it mottled with age, it was also damaged. He stood on the head of the golden crow statue and looked around with his hand over his eyes. He quickly saw the figures of two more statues. One of them was in the northeast while the other was in the southwest. They were both more than 10 miles away from him. After observing them from a distance for a long time, he recognized that the two huge stone statues were carved with ancient beasts. He continued to observe his surroundings and soon saw several ancient beast statues. Between each stone sculpture, there was a distance of more than 10 miles, and they were all carved with a kind of ancient strange beast. Besides Lu Wu, the dragon eagle, and the three-legged golden crow, he also saw Chao Feng, Kuei ox, and Zhu Yang. In the end, he found a total of 12 ancient strange beast statues in a 50-mile radius of the desert. These strange beast statues were arranged according to a special pattern and position, forming a circle. He walked to the center of the desert and stood on a raised sand dune. He could clearly see the 12 stone sculptures of strange beasts around him. What was strange was that the sand dune under his feet was exactly 19 miles away from each of the stone sculptures. Ji Tianxing knew that this was no coincidence. Those 12 strange beast statues definitely contained the mysteries of some kind of formation. These strange beast statues are somewhat strange. They are very likely related to Full Moon Lake. They definitely wouldn't appear here for no reason. I have to study them carefully. Perhaps I can find clues about Full Moon Lake and the heavenly star pearl from these strange beast statues. Ji Tianxing thought for a moment and then walked down the sand dune. He was prepared to personally climb up each stone sculpture and carefully observe if there were any clues hidden in the stone sculptures. But at this moment, a few dark clouds suddenly appeared in the originally clear sky. The tranquil desert suddenly began to shake violently, as if a great earthquake had occurred. Amidst the muffled rumbling, a wide gully appeared on the ground. The desert within a radius of dozens of miles began to collapse. The strange thing was that only the area surrounded by the 12 strange beast statues was constantly collapsing and sinking. Outside of this place, the ground was still calm and the sky was still clear. Ji Tianxing's expression immediately changed. He tried his best to escape. He knew very well that such a strange and shocking upheaval must be related to those strange beast statues. However, just as he rushed down the sand dune, the desert under his feet collapsed with a bang, turning into endless yellow sand and sinking deep into the ground. A huge black hole appeared under his feet. It was like a bottomless abyss, swallowing the endless yellow sand. He was also unable to escape. Together with the yellow sand in the sky, he fell into the pitch-black abyss as if he was falling into hell. After an unknown period of time, he suddenly saw a faint light at the end of the abyss under his feet. As he fell rapidly and got closer to the light, he realized that it was a layer of pale silver light curtain. It was boundless and abnormally vast. In the next moment, he mixed with the yellow sand in the sky and charged into the pale silver light curtain. Buzz! The strong collision caused a loud buzzing sound to explode in his mind. He was shaken to the point that his consciousness blurred and he fainted. A moment later, he passed through the pale silver light curtain in his unconscious state and fell into a boundless void. The void was dark and cold. Only bits of starlight flickered in the distance. His falling speed kept decreasing until it finally came to a stop. He lightly landed in the void of space, hovering motionlessly in the air. There was clearly nothing below him, but it was as if there was a layer of invisible ground supporting him steadily. He was unconscious. He lay motionless in the void, quietly sleeping. It was as if he had become one with the boundless void. The void was incomparably quiet. Time passed silently. After an unknown period of time, perhaps 3 to 5 days, or perhaps 3 to 5 months, Ji Tianxing finally woke up. He slowly opened his eyes, rubbed his throbbing forehead, and sat up. He looked around and found that his surroundings were boundless darkness. There was nothing around him. In the vast void under his feet, thousands of silver light spots were densely distributed. Each light spot was a star. The thousands of stars were distributed according to a certain pattern, forming a mysterious and vast star map. Chapter 291. To the humankind, the boundless void and the densely packed stars were the most distant and mysterious existence. No matter what realm a cultivator was in, they could only observe the stars from afar. They could not enter the void and explore the mysteries of the stars. But now, Ji Tianxing had miraculously arrived in the void and saw the stars with his own eyes. Of course, he was full of excitement and awe. He felt like he was in a dream and it was unbelievable. However, after his excitement dissipated and he calmed down, he had to face a problem. How could he leave this void? How could he go back? Though the boundless void and the stars were magnificent, he could not stay here forever. Therefore, Ji Tianxing quickly calmed down. He frowned and thought about how to leave. He stared at the void and the stars beneath his feet and silently observed the mysterious map of stars. He wanted to find clues from it. When he focused on the map of stars, he could not help but be immersed in it. It was as if he was being sucked in by the map of stars. Time passed by quietly. He maintained his posture of careful observation and did not move an inch. After a long while, he finally regained his senses. Light flashed across his eyes and the corner of his lips curled up into a smile. I see. Who would have thought that these 36,000 stars would form a heavenly cycle star formation? The cosmic array was an array created by the humankind in the Tianqian land. It took a few generations of power and wisdom to create this array. The number and position of the stars in this array corresponded to the 36 Big Dipper stars. The arrangement and circulation path of every single star was traceable, and it contained the truth of the Heaven Tao. It was not an overstatement to say that the cosmic array was one of the best treasures of the humankind. If the descendants of the humankind wanted to study and explore the mysteries of the stars, they would have to spend a lot of time studying the cosmic array. Fortunately, Ji Tianxing had studied this array when he was studying arrays with Xiong Wuji in the Taiyan Palace. Xiong Wuji was also obsessed with the stellar map of the universe. He had studied it for decades and was very proficient in it. He had discovered Ji Tianxing's talent in the Tao of formations, so he had specially mentioned the heavenly cycle stellar diagram when he was imparting the Tao of formations to him. Ji Tianxing paced back and forth in the void as he stared at the stars in the sky. The heavenly cycle star diagram kept appearing in his mind as he tried to figure out a way to break it. He walked through space at a neither fast nor slow pace while his gaze grew clearer and deeper, and the imposing aura he emanated grew even more mysterious and formidable. 1 day, 2 days, 4 days passed quickly. Ji Tianxing seemed to know no tiredness. He walked in mysterious and complicated steps in the void without stopping for 4 days and 4 nights. On the 5th day, he finally stopped after taking 99,000 steps. At this moment, he was standing directly above a huge star. I've finally found it. The Duke Star. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows as a confident smile appeared on his face. In these 4 days, he had taken 99,000 steps. He had been following the cosmic array's path to break the array and find the exit. Now, he had finally succeeded. He had found the Duke Star, which was hidden among tens of thousands of stars. This star was huge and dazzling. It shone with a blinding silver light like the moon. However, only those who stood where Ji Tianxing was could notice its existence and see its light. This was one of the secrets of the cosmic array. The Duke Star was also one of the exits of the array. This array was extraordinary. Many powerhouses could not understand it even after spending their entire lives trying. Ji Tianxing raised his head and looked forward. He extended his palms and waved them around in the dark void, drawing out a golden arc. His palms continued to emit vital energy into the void as if he was trying to open something. About an hour later, in the void 10 steps in front of him, a dazzling white light suddenly lit up. Whoosh! Dazzling white light instantly condensed into an oval-shaped teleportation portal, standing quietly in the void. Only then did Ji Tianxing retract his palms. The corners of his mouth curled up into a smile as he walked towards the teleportation door that was flickering with white light. Whoosh! With a flash of white light, Ji Tianxing stepped into the portal and disappeared. In the next instant, he left the boundless starry sky and appeared in a dark hall out of thin air. The floor was made of wide, square, black stone slabs. Although there were patterns on the surface, they were covered with a thick layer of dust. The hall was empty and silent. The air was filled with the smell of decay as if it had not been used for countless years. The ceiling above his head was dotted with jewels, forming a vast pattern of stars. However, those gems were too old, and the power of many of them had already been exhausted, turning into dull ordinary stones. Only a dozen jewels were left. They were still emitting a faint light that dispelled the darkness. Ji Tianxing stood in the middle of the hall and looked around with an expressionless face. He thought to himself, where is this? Am I still in the hidden fog mountain range? With the help of the faint light emitted by the jewels, he observed the hall with his sharp eyes. On his left and right, about 10 meters away, There were 2 rows of huge stone pillars that supported the dome of the hall. Each stone pillar was as thick as a water tank. They were red in color and had many patterns drawn on them with golden lines. Ji Tianxing gently blew away the dust on the stone pillars and saw the patterns clearly. They depicted ancient beasts, such as the dragon eagle, Lu Wu, Zhu Yang, and Chao Feng. There were 6 stone pillars on each side of the hall. Each stone pillar had an ancient beast carved on it. The beast patterns on the 12 stone pillars corresponded to the beast carvings he had seen before. At this point, Ji Tianxing had an answer in his heart. Obviously, this hall was still in the hidden fog mountain range, in the full moon lake area. He lifted his foot and walked towards the north. After 100 steps, he stopped. In front of him were 9 levels of stone steps. At the top of the stone steps was a flat platform. On the platform was a huge throne with an aura as majestic as a mountain. The throne was cast from an unknown dark gold metal. It was 5 meters long and 3 meters wide. A circle of complicated patterns were carved on it. Although this throne was very old and covered in a thick layer of dust, it was dark and gloomy. However, its size and aura far surpassed any throne Ji Tianxing had ever seen. Whether it was the throne of an emperor in a mundane kingdom or the throne of the Sky Pillar sect master, none could compare to this dark gold throne. On the left side of the dark gold throne was a huge black stone tortoise. The stone tortoise was carved vividly and exuded a majestic aura. On its back was a 3-meter-tall stone tablet. A hint of surprise flashed through Ji Tianxing's eyes when he saw this. Chapter 292. According to the ancient saying, the dragon had 9 sons, all of them different. The divine dragon's 6th son was called Bian, also known as Baxia. Its appearance was similar to a turtle, but it had a row of sharp teeth in its mouth that could swallow mountains and rivers. Legend had it that Baxia was born with boundless strength and loved to carry heavy loads. It would often carry mountains and lakes on its back to stir up trouble, causing rivers to overturn and floods to fill the sky. In ancient times, a human god saw the suffering of the human race and took pity on them, so he subdued dragon's son Baxia. That ancient human god ordered Baxia to dig up mountains and rivers, clean up the waterways, and control the floods. After countless years, the floods that ravaged the world were finally subdued, and the people were finally able to live in peace. That human god was worried that Baxia would cause trouble again, so he prayed to the heavens and sent down a towering stone stele for Baxia to carry on its back so that it could not move around freely. The stone stele recorded the story of the human god and Baxia's achievements. It could reach the heavens and convey the will of the heavens. Of course, Ji Tianxing knew that this ancient legend was just a myth and might not be very trustworthy. However, in this ancient and majestic hall, he saw a dragon's son Baxia carrying a stone stele. Naturally, he would pay more attention and take a few more glances. He walked over the dust-covered steps and stood in front of Baxia, observing the stone stele on its back at close range. Lines of ancient characters were indeed carved on the pitch-black stone stele. These characters were extremely strange. They looked like twisted symbols, but also like tadpoles pieced together. Ji Tianxing observed for a moment and realized that these ancient characters were not of the human race. He was puzzled as he pondered these characters when he suddenly saw a faint green light in Baxia's eyes. An ancient and heavy voice suddenly sounded in his mind. 1,000 years. After 1,000 years, someone has finally come here. The voice was low and hoarse, full of emotion and lamentation. Ji Tianxing was immediately jolted awake. He looked at stone turtle Baxia with shining eyes and asked, "Are you the one speaking?" Although he found it hard to understand, how could a stone tortoise without any signs of life speak? However, everything he had experienced in the hidden fog mountain range was so mysterious and unbelievable. This ancient hall also exuded a mysterious aura. Even if the stone tortoise spoke, he wouldn't be surprised. He was already used to it. The green light in the stone tortoise's eyes flickered, and the deep, hoarse voice rang out in his mind again. "Kid, you are the first person to enter the ancient star palace in the past 1,000 years. You are very lucky and very special." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly to the stone tortoise as a sign of respect. He knew that the stone tortoise was communicating with him through soul telepathy, so he asked, "Senior, may I ask who you are? The stone turtle's eyes flickered as he replied via soul transmission, me? I'm just an old servant guarding the ancient star palace. Now, I'm just a wisp of my soul. Kid, since you can enter the ancient star palace, you are a fated person. My soul has been awakened by you, but it won't last for long. Soon, it will disappear from this world. I can see that you are full of questions. If you have anything to ask as soon as possible. As long as I know, I will try my best to answer you. Ji Tianxing immediately cupped his fists and said with a sincere tone, Thank you, Senior. Senior, may I ask where this is? Is it in the Full Moon Lake? Stone Turtle Ba Xia said indifferently, This is the ancient star palace, located at the bottom of the Full Moon Lake. It is protected by the Full Moon Lake and the massive heavenly cycle stellar formation. Only those who are fated can enter. Ji Tianxing nodded to show that he understood. He could guess that the reason why he could enter this ancient palace was related to the disappearance of the Full Moon Lake. He continued to ask, Senior, who is the owner of this ancient star palace? The stone tortoise said with a serious tone, My master's title is the Bright Moon Demon Emperor. He is a famous elite in the Tianxian continent, one of the 6 overlords of the demon clan. This ancient star palace is my master's temporary residence. Heavenly origin stage demons and demons could only be called demon kings and demon kings. Only those who had surpassed the heavenly origin stage and reached an even more powerful stage could be called emperor. Ji Tianxing was shocked that the owner of this ancient star palace, the Bright Moon Demon Emperor, had surpassed the heavenly origin stage. He asked again, Senior, I came to the Full Moon Lake after many difficulties to find the legendary Heavenly Star Pearl. I obtained an ancient book, and it was recorded that the Heavenly Star Pearl's aura had appeared in the Full Moon Lake. I wonder where the Heavenly Star Pearl is now? Stone Turtle Ba Xia was stunned and said with a serious tone, Kid, this is a long story, so I'll make it short. My master, the Bright Moon Demon Emperor, did obtain the Heavenly Star Pearl and kept it with him. He often thought of the magnificent Kenshin when he looked at it. However, not long after my master obtained the Heavenly Star Pearl, a human elite broke into the ancient star palace and took the Heavenly Star Pearl. Ji Tianxing was even more confused when he heard this. He asked instinctively, Senior, what's the relationship between the Bright Moon Demon Emperor and Kenshin? Stone Turtle Ba Xia's tone was complicated as he said, My master was the overlord of the demon clan and a beautiful saintess. She met Kenshin in the western mainland and fell in love with Kenshin at first sight. That's why she followed him here. However, Kenshin was not an ordinary person. Why would he be reluctant to leave the secular world? My poor master was so infatuated, but in the end, she was lonely and lonely. Sigh. At this point, Stone Turtle Ba Xia sighed with emotion. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and remembered this story. He continued to ask, Senior, who was the human elite who took the Heavenly Star Pearl? Stone Turtle Ba Xia answered, That person called himself Emperor Yi. He was enlightened and taught by Kenshin and called himself Kenshin's successor. He was quite famous in the ancient star realm and left behind many legends. Emperor Yi? Kenshin's successor? Ji Tianxing raised an eyebrow and immediately thought of the ancient tomb at the foot of Dragon Mountain. He pondered for a moment and said solemnly, Senior, not long ago, I found an ancient tomb at the foot of Dragon Mountain. That ancient tomb seems to be the tomb of the Kenshin's successor, Emperor Yi. The ancient tomb is protected by a grand Tianyuan formation. He told Stone Turtle Ba Xia about the situation and information about the ancient tomb on Dragon Mountain. Stone Turtle Ba Xia was silent for a moment before he said with certainty, Boy, if that ancient tomb is really Emperor Yi's tomb, then the Heavenly Star Pearl must be in the ancient tomb. As for the ancient tomb's protective formation, the Grand Tianyuan formation from 1,000 years ago is indeed very mysterious and difficult to break for today's martial experts. Chapter 293. Ji Tianxing had come to the Full Moon Lake after many hardships. He was full of anticipation for the Heavenly Star Bead. However, he was told by Stone Turtle Ba Xia that the Heavenly Star Bead was not in the Starry Hall. He was a little disappointed, and his mood was a little down. However, Stone Turtle Bashir told him that the heavenly star bead was most likely in the Dragon Mountain tomb. Moreover, it was willing to teach him the method to crack the Grand Heaven formation. To Ji Tianxing, this was undoubtedly a pleasant surprise that had turned the situation around. He immediately cupped his hands and bowed to the stone turtle. "Thank you for your help, Senior. I can't thank you enough." Stone Turtle Bashir did not reply, but the black stone tablet on its back lit up with a hazy white light. The white light was like a screen, and it immediately showed the image of the Grand Heaven formation. The formation in the image was majestic and very mysterious. Ji Tianxing was in awe of it. Soon, the image began to change, showing the structure and network of the Grand Heaven formation. It also showed the method to crack it. Ji Tianxing looked at the stone tablet attentively, immersing himself in the image of the formation, carefully observing and figuring it out. This is the Heaven Origin Array formation of the three talents. As time passed, the image in the white light screen kept changing, clearly and completely dissecting the mystery of the Grand Heaven formation. Ji Tianxing memorized the method to crack the formation, and every image was imprinted in his mind. Then, a new image appeared on the white light screen. It was a new Tianyuan formation. This is the Grand Heaven formation of the four symbols unification. Ji Tianxing immediately saw the clue. He stared at the light screen and studied it seriously. An hour later, the Grand Heaven formation of the four symbols unification was finished, and a new formation appeared in the white light screen. The 5 elements derivation, 6 direction stabilization, Big Dipper 7 stars, 8 extreme dragon lock, and other formations appeared in front of Ji Tianxing one by one. In the end, even the top secret formation of the 9 cauldrons universe appeared. Ji Tianxing was excited, and he found it unbelievable. Next, more Grand Heaven formation appeared in the white light screen, showing the method to crack the formation in detail. Ji Tianxing stared at the light screen and studied it carefully, forgetting the passage of time. Unknowingly, 12 hours had passed. More than 20 ways to crack the Heaven Origin Array were displayed on the white light screen. Every Tianyuan formation was extremely profound and mysterious, and the way to break it was extremely complicated. Even with Ji Tianxing's talent in the Tao of Arrays, it was impossible for him to memorize over 20 different methods to break the array. Finally, the white light screen disappeared, and the black stone tablet on the back of the stone tortoise dimmed. Stone Turtle Bashir's voice also sounded in Ji Tianxing's mind. "Kid, the 24 types of Tianyuan formation I taught you include most of the Tianyuan grand formations on the continent. As long as you can comprehend all 24 types of formations and master them, you can become a Grandmaster of formations. Any formation below the heavenly origin level won't be a problem for you." Ji Tianxing was very excited when he heard this. He was filled with anticipation and yearning to reach the great Grandmaster realm. He hurriedly said, "Thank you for teaching me, Senior." Emperor Yi's tomb under Dragon Mountain used 5 different formation methods: derivation of the 5 elements, stabilization of the 6 directions, 7 stars of the heavenly dipper, 8 dragon lock, and 9 cauldrons of the universe. After I comprehend the way to crack these 5 formations, I can activate the guardian formation of Emperor Yi's tomb. Stone Turtle Bashir said in a serious tone, "Kid, although your talent in the Tao of Arrays is quite high, with your current strength, it's definitely difficult to crack the Tianyuan grand formation of Emperor Yi's tomb." Back then, the Burial of Heaven had also said this to Ji Tianxing. He immediately frowned and asked in return, "Senior, could it be that only by reaching the primal core realm can I crack that formation?" Stone Turtle Bashir was silent for a moment and said in a serious tone, "The primal core realm is just the beginning. You're only qualified to use the method to crack the formation. The success rate is not high. Moreover, the guardian formation of Emperor Yi's tomb uses 5 different Tianyuan grand formation methods. They are intertwined and fused together. It's very complicated and dangerous. Although I can't see the formation with my own eyes, I have to remind you that the 5 formations are superimposed and fused together. You must follow a specific order to crack them. If you make a mistake in the order of cracking the formation, you'll suffer a backlash from the formation and lose your life." Hearing how serious its tone was, Ji Tianxing understood that this matter had to be taken very seriously and could not be taken lightly. He definitely would not be able to fully grasp the method to crack the formation in a short period of time. He would have to wait patiently for a long time. He thought for a moment and asked somewhat unwillingly, "Senior, if I teach the method to break the formation to other experts and let them crack the genuine grand formation, is it possible?" Stone Turtle Bashya said in a firm tone, "Of course not. Everyone's talent in the Tao of Arrays is different, and their understanding of formations is also different. I've just taught you the 24 formations, but can you fully grasp them now? Obviously not. If you teach the method to break the formation to other experts, their understanding of the formation will definitely be different. When they try to crack the formation, there will definitely be a mistake. The formation guarding the tomb is a top genuine grand formation. There is no room for error. Otherwise, the formation will self-destruct, and the person cracking the formation and the entire tomb will be reduced to ashes." Ji Tianxing did not dare to have any more fantasies after the stone turtle's explanation was so clear. He could only do his best to comprehend the method to crack the formation. When the time came, he would personally crack the formation of the Longshan tomb. At that moment, a hazy white light burst out from the stone turtle's eyes and drilled into Ji Tianxing's head like flowing water. Swoosh! He immediately felt an endless amount of information rushing into his head like a torrential flood. It made him dizzy. The stone turtle's voice also became weak. It warned solemnly, "Kid, this is the essence of the 24 formations. I'll implant it into your head. You have to calm down and comprehend it with all your might. Only then can you completely refine it. In a few days, or at most half a month, you'll truly comprehend the method to break the formation. You'll never forget it." As it spoke, its voice became fainter and fainter. In the end, it could not be heard at all. Clearly, Stone Turtle Bashya's remnant soul had disappeared from the world forever. Ji Tianxing stood in front of the stone tortoise and bowed with a sincere expression on his face. He silently expressed his gratitude. Then, he sat cross-legged on the ground and closed his eyes. He channeled his energy to refine the vast amount of information in his head. Time passed silently, and the two hazy balls of white light in his mind continued to spread and merge into his soul. His entire body was vaguely covered in a hazy white light, making him look calm and mysterious. Unknowingly, 8 days had passed. Chapter 294. After finishing his cultivation, Ji Tianxing opened his eyes and stood up. At this moment, apart from being slightly weaker, he was already a formation Tao Grandmaster. Any formation below the Heaven Origin grade would not be a problem for him. He had mastered the essence of the 24 Heaven Origin formations, which meant that he had mastered the core and origin of formation Tao. Any formation below the Heaven Origin grade was an extension or branch of the 24 formations. As the saying went, no matter how many changes there were, they would remain the same. He had mastered the origin of formation Tao, so it was easy for him to break any formation. He took a deep look at Stone Turtle Bashya before walking toward the back of the dark golden throne. There was a black stone door in the black palace wall behind the throne. The door frame was engraved with formation patterns and symbols. After passing through the black stone door, he would be able to leave the ancient Star Palace and return to the hidden Fog Mountain range. He only took a short 100 breaths to break the formation on the stone door. After the stone door opened, a transportation portal formed by white light appeared. Swoosh! Ji Tianxing stepped through the transportation portal and left the ancient Star Palace in a flash. He returned to the desert filled with yellow sand. The sky was filled with dense clouds, and a storm was blowing in the desert. It swept up sand and covered the sky. He stood on the sand dune and looked around. He noticed that the 12 mutated beast statues had long disappeared, and the abyss was no longer there. He was surrounded by the slowly rising and falling desert. There was nothing out of the ordinary. It was as if the 12 mutated beast statues had never appeared. His experience of falling into the starry sky and entering the ancient Star Palace was like a dream. "I've already been delayed for almost a month. The Heaven Roll tournament is in a few days. I hope I can still make it," Ji Tianxing muttered softly before he turned around and left the sand dune. He walked through the storm and sand and walked toward the north with firm steps. 6 hours later, he finally walked out of the desert and left the full moon lake area. Next, he followed the map's guidance and looked for the exit of the hidden fog mountain range. After leaving the full moon lake, he passed through 2 dangerous areas and experienced several dangerous battles. He only walked out of the hidden fog mountain range a day later. He rode on Chen Yu and rushed back to the Sky Pillar sect. The distance from the hidden fog mountain range to the Sky Pillar sect was more than 1,500 kilometers. On the evening of the 3rd day, Ji Tianxing returned to the Sky Pillar sect covered in dust. He stood at the foot of the heaven-upholding peak and looked up at the towering mountain gate, his face filled with fatigue. On the inner court plaza at the peak of towering Sky Peak, more than 20 inner sect disciples were gathered in groups of 3 to 5, discussing in low voices. There was a young disciple who was as thin as a monkey and had a thin face. His eyes were bright and cunning, and he was surrounded by a few inner court disciples. This person was a famous person among the inner disciples. His nickname was Clairaudient, and he was famous for being well-informed. Squatting on a stone bench under the tree, he was telling some gossips and legends to his disciples. A tall young man listened for a while and asked, "Clairaudient, everyone says that you're well-informed. Then tell us, where did Ji Tianxing run off to? That kid hasn't appeared since the demon cave was destroyed. It's been a month, and the Heaven Roll Grand Tournament is starting tomorrow." When the other young disciples heard this, they immediately nodded in agreement, and all of them started to talk at once. "That's right. Clairaudient, tell us quickly. Is the kid like the rumors? Is he afraid of senior brother Bai's strength and has been hiding? If you ask me, the rumors are most likely true. With Ji Tianxing's strength at the 2nd stage of the mystic comprehending stage, who can he defeat? He, let alone senior brother Bai, even I, who's at the 6th stage of the mystic comprehending stage, can easily defeat Ji Tianxing. Do you believe me?" Clairaudient revealed a playful smile and gestured for everyone to keep quiet. When the few inner court disciples quietened down, he lowered his voice and said, "Actually, everyone knows about this. All the disciples are talking about it now. It's not just us inner court disciples. The outer court disciples are even more anxious. These few days, they've been talking about Ji Tianxing all day. I've also heard that even some deacons and elders are paying attention to this matter. They're very disappointed in Ji Tianxing." The few inner court disciples listened carefully and nodded in agreement. Clairaudient ear revealed a mocking sneer and continued, "I heard that 5 days ago, the sect leader sent people out to search for Ji Tianxing. He gave the order that Ji Tianxing must be found. It's a pity that we don't know where Ji Tianxing is hiding. 5 whole days have passed, and there's still no news of him. Everyone, you don't have to guess. Ji Tianxing must have run away because of fear. He must be hiding in some corner, trembling in fear." The disciples believed his words without a doubt, and they all sneered in disdain and ridicule. "He, as expected, that kid has run away in the end. TSK, a month ago, he issued a challenge in the square. How imposing and confident he was. I didn't expect him to reveal his true colors just a few days after he issued the challenge. That kid is as timid as a mouse. He actually ran away because of fear. What a disgrace. The honorable sect leader's personal disciple is actually so cowardly and incompetent. It's really an eye-opener. Alright, let's not talk about that good-for-nothing anymore. Let's talk about tomorrow's Heaven List tournament and guess the rankings of the few senior brothers." Thus, the few disciples changed the topic and talked about the Heaven List tournament. However, they had just chatted for a few sentences when they heard an incredulous exclamation from all around. Someone even shouted out Ji Tianxing's name involuntarily. The few disciples were stunned for a moment and hurriedly turned to look at the entrance of the square. He saw a young man with ragged clothes and unkempt hair walking toward him, looking travel-stained. Although he looked very miserable, as if he was a survivor who had crawled out of a mountain of swords and a sea of fire. However, his eyes were clear and deep, and his body faintly exuded a confident and powerful aura. The confidence and determination that came from the depths of his soul was like an invisible sharp sword, making many disciples in the square feel ashamed of their inferiority. The discussion in the square disappeared. Everyone stared at the young man in disbelief and their expressions became extremely complicated. After a while, when Ji Tianxing ignored the crowd and walked straight through the inner sect square, many disciples came to their senses. Ji Tianxing. It's him. Why is he back? Impossible. Did he run away because of fear? How could he come back now? Where has he been hiding for the past month? Why is he in such a miserable state, like a beggar? Ji Tianxing is back. I have to hurry and tell the others. There will be a good show tomorrow. Chapter 295. After Ji Tianxing left the square, he went straight back to Tianxing courtyard. The two servants and the maidservant, Xiao Shuang, who were guarding the courtyard, were cleaning the courtyard listlessly. They seemed to be in low spirits. Obviously, in the month that Ji Tianxing left the sect, there were many rumors and slanders in the sect. The servants and maidservant, Xiao Shuang, were also implicated and ridiculed by others. When Ji Tianxing stepped into the courtyard, the servants and maidservant, Xiao Shuang, were stunned when they saw him. When the three of them came back to their senses, they were immediately pleasantly surprised. They hurriedly came up to greet him. Senior brother Ji, you're finally back. That's great. Senior brother Ji, you're finally back. Senior brother Ji, I'll go boil some water for you and help you wash up. The three of them seemed to have found their backbone. They were in high spirits and straightened their backs. Ji Tianxing only nodded slightly at the three of them and went back to his room to take a bath and change his clothes. He sat in the room for a while, and maidservant, Xiao Shuang, brought in a wooden basin and hot water. Just as he finished washing his face, a servant disciple came in to report to him. Senior brother Ji, Senior brother Bai is here to look for you. He's waiting outside the door. The servant disciple's tone was a little strange. He seemed to be angry with senior brother Bai, but he dared not say anything. Ji Tianxing immediately frowned. A sharp light flashed in his eyes. Hehe, I just came back. How did he get the news so quickly? He sneered in his heart. He stepped out of the room and came to the entrance of the courtyard. Bai Wuchen was waiting outside the door. He exuded an arrogant and cold aura, and there was a cold smile on his face. He looked at Ji Tianxing contemptuously and said in a strange tone, Hehe, junior brother Ji, you haven't shown up for a month. I thought you ran away because you didn't dare to come back. Junior brother Ji must have been hiding and running around in this month, right? Otherwise, why would you be in such a sorry state? Ji Tianxing looked at him expressionlessly and said coldly, It's just a duel with you. What's there to be afraid of? You don't have the qualifications to make me take you seriously. Bai Wuchen did not get angry. As if he did not hear Ji Yunshu's words, he sneered and said, Junior brother Ji, I'm surprised that you have the courage to come back. Don't worry, I won't let you lose too badly in front of all the disciples, deacons, and elders in the heaven ranking competition tomorrow. Ji Tianxing looked at him as if he was looking at a fool. He revealed a look of pity and said indifferently, Seeing that you are still so stupid, I am relieved. Bai Wuchen furrowed his brows. A cold light flashed in his eyes, but he quickly concealed it. He was furious, but he didn't want to show it. Ever since he had been angered to the point of vomiting blood by Chen Yu, he had secretly made up his mind that no matter how angry he was, he would not let Ji Tianxing see him. Junior brother Ji, let's meet at the inner sanctum square tomorrow. Don't chicken out at the last minute. It's just a year of being a servant disciple. You will get used to it soon. Bai Wuchen sneered. After saying that, he turned and left Tianxing courtyard. Ji Tianxing ignored Bai Wuchen's mockery and returned to his room expressionlessly. After an hour, he finished washing up and changed into a new white robe. He had regained his handsome and heroic appearance. At this moment, a woman in a white dress with an otherworldly temperament arrived at the entrance of Tianxing courtyard. When the maid, Xiao Shuang, saw her, her face was filled with respect. She bowed and greeted her eldest senior sister. The woman in the white dress was Yun Yarrow. Xiao Shuang led her through the courtyard and into the living room. When Ji Tianxing heard that Yun Yarrow had arrived, he quickly walked into the living room and greeted her. Yun Yarrow looked at him with a complicated expression before she said, It's been a month since we last met. You're finally back. Everyone has been worried about you during this period of time. 5 days ago, Master even sent someone to look for you. Ji Tianxing sat down next to her and said apologetically, I'm sorry to have made everyone worried. Yun Yarrow continued to ask, I heard from the disciples that you were covered in dust when you came back. You were covered in wounds and looked a little disheveled. Did anything happen? Ji Tianxing shook his head and said calmly, I only went to settle some personal matters. Although it was a little dangerous, it was nothing serious. That's good. Yun Yarrow nodded and observed him for a moment. Suddenly, a hint of surprise flashed across her clear eyes. Junior brother Tianxing, you've reached the 5th stage of the mystic enlightening stage? Ji Tianxing's strength had increased. Moreover, his sword embryo had merged with the power of flame. His strength had become low profile and obscure. Ordinary mystic enlightening stage experts, such as Bai Wuchen, would not be able to see his strength level. Only a primal core expert like Yun Yarrow would be able to see through his strength. Ji Tianxing did not hide it. He nodded calmly and said, That's right. I haven't seen you for a month and you've advanced by 3 stages. It's simply unbelievable. Yun Yarrow's beautiful face was filled with astonishment. She could not help but exclaim. She looked at Ji Tianxing with a deep gaze. Her thoughts went back to a few months ago. She recalled the first time she met Ji Tianxing in Qingyun Nation. At that time, Ji Tianxing was still a trash at the 3rd level of the body refinement realm. He was extremely weak. However, in the short span of a month, he had reached the true energy realm and won 1st place in the tournament. The speed at which his strength increased was simply unimaginable. Thinking back to the past few months, Yun Yarrow realized that he had been rapidly growing and rising. He had also been creating miracles. The closer she got to Ji Tianxing and the more she understood him, the more she felt that she could not see through him. This feeling filled her heart with shock, gratification, and happiness. After a while, Yun Yarrow collected her thoughts and revealed a faint smile. She said to Ji Tianxing, Since that's the case, have a good rest and prepare for tomorrow's Heaven List tournament. I'll go and report the news to Master now. Ji Tianxing stood up and cupped his hands. He smiled and said, Then I'll have to trouble eldest senior sister. Help me report to Master that I'm safe. Yun Yarrow nodded and left. Ji Tianxing sent her out of the door and watched her figure disappear into the distance. Only then did he turn around and return to his room. After that, no one came to Tianxing's courtyard to disturb him. He had been on the move for a month and experienced all kinds of life and death dangers. He was already physically and mentally exhausted. After returning to his room, he laid on the bed in a relaxed manner. He closed his eyes to rest and conserve his energy. That night, undercurrents surged in the Sky Pillar sect. It was not calm. The news of Ji Tianxing's return to the Sky Pillar sect had already spread in the sect. Previously, countless disciples thought that he had escaped. They had all discussed and mocked him contemptuously. Many people felt that he would probably become the biggest laughingstock in the Tianchen region. However, no one expected that he would return the day before the Heaven List tournament. Countless disciples were filled with surprise and were filled with anticipation for tomorrow's Heaven List tournament. Chapter 296. The next morning. At dawn, more than 500 inner disciples rushed to the inner square at the peak of the mountain, full of excitement. Today was the day of the Heaven List tournament, the most sacred and solemn day in the Sky Pillar sect. There were only 30 spots on the Heaven List. Among the 100 inner disciples participating in the Heaven List tournament, only the top 30 could enter the Heaven List. The 30 inner disciples who could enter the Heaven List were the most outstanding geniuses of the Sky Pillar sect, including a few elite geniuses. The Heaven List tournament was very important. It was even related to the future and prosperity of the Sky Pillar sect. All the inner disciples would put down everything and rush to the square to watch the Heaven List tournament. Even the deacons, elders, and sect master Chu Tianxing would personally come to watch. What's more, today's Heaven List tournament was not only the day for the inner disciples to challenge the rankings, but it was also the day for the battle between Ji Tianxing and Bai Wuchen. For nearly a month, countless disciples had been discussing and paying attention to this matter. Today, they could finally see the result. Would the sect master's disciple, Ji Tianxing, Be defeated and endure the humiliation of being a servant disciple for a year? Or would the elite genius, Bai Wuchen, be defeated in public and abandon his previous glory and status to do manual labor like sweeping the ground and raising horses? Everyone was discussing animatedly, waiting to see what would happen. By the time the sun rose, more than 500 inner disciples had arrived. At this time, several elite geniuses also arrived one after another. Chen Su and Tang Yiluo stood side by side in the square and whispered with smiles on their faces. Junior brother Tang, guess who between Ji Tianxing and Bai Wuchen will take off their white robes and become a servant? Haha, senior brother Chen, is there any doubt? It's definitely Ji Tianxing. Yes, I think so too. Ji Tianxing's strength is too far from Bai Wuchen's. Even if he disappeared for a month, he might not be Bai Wuchen's opponent even if he went into seclusion for a few years. Later, the sect master and several elders will be present. I want to see how the sect master will react when Ji Tianxing is defeated and becomes a servant. Haha, who dares to embarrass the sect master? When that happens, Ji Tianxing and Bai Wuchen will be in deep trouble. Beside the two of them stood a tall and sturdy young elite. It was Hao Meng. When he heard Chen Su and Tang Yiluo's sneers, he instinctively frowned. Moreover, he had other thoughts in his mind and did not agree with Chen Su and Tang Yiluo's words. Thinking back to a month ago when he and Ji Tianxing had joined forces to deal with the witch, Ji Tianxing had executed that sword strike, he was certain that Ji Tianxing was definitely not as simple as he seemed on the surface. He even had a premonition that something unexpected might happen in the Heaven Roll tournament later. At this moment, Bai Wuchen walked through the crowd and arrived at the square, standing beside Hao Meng. The gazes of the hundreds of inner sect disciples gathered on him in unison. Many disciples smiled and looked at him encouragingly. Some even cheered for him. Bai Wuchen ignored everyone's reaction and stood in the middle of the field with his eyes closed. He looked calm and confident. Seeing his reaction, Hao Meng could not help but frown. After a moment of hesitation, he reminded Bai Wuchen through his spiritual sense, "Senior brother Bai, don't underestimate Ji Tianxing. I have a feeling that he might have some trump card." Without waiting for Hao Meng to finish, Bai Wuchen opened his eyes and sneered. "Haha, junior brother Hao, you're taking him too seriously. If he has a trump card, do you think I don't have one too? He's just a poor boy from the mountains. So what if he's lucky? Today, I'll trample him under my feet and let him know who's the real God's favored one." Hao Meng choked on the second half of his sentence. He stared at Bai Wuchen with his big round eyes and did not say a word. At this moment, a young man in a white robe walked steadily toward the square under the rising sun. Many disciples stopped their discussion and turned to look at the young man in the white robe. Hao Meng, Bai Wuchen, Chen Su, and Tang Yiluo also looked at him in unison, their eyes filled with complicated emotions. There was no doubt that the young man was Ji Tianxing. He ignored everyone's stares and walked to the center of the square. He stood beside the elite disciples. No matter what kind of strange gazes the hundreds of inner disciples cast at him, no matter what kind of ridicule or comments they made, he remained expressionless, neither sad nor happy. It was as if in his eyes, the hundreds of inner disciples were just weeds on the side of the road or ants in the soil. They were insignificant. Bai Wuchen's face darkened. He stared at Ji Tianxing with a sharp gaze, his whole body surging with coldness. Chen Su and Tang Yiluo looked at him silently. They walked to his side and smiled at him. Tang Yiluo asked with concern, "Junior brother Ji, I heard that you came back yesterday with disheveled hair and a dirty face. Are you injured? Will it affect the competition?" Chen Su also smiled and said with concern, "Junior brother Ji, you're still young. Unlike junior brother Bai, who has been cultivating in the sect for many years. When the competition starts, don't try to be brave. You must act according to the situation. If the situation is critical, you must admit defeat." Tang Yiluo nodded in agreement. He said earnestly, "Isn't it just a year of handyman? A real man must know when to yield and when to stand tall. Only then can you achieve great things. Anyway, you've only been in the sect for a few months. It's normal that you can't beat junior brother Bai. Everyone will understand and the sect master won't blame you. Ji Tianxing looked at the two of them with an indifferent expression, and a cold smile flashed across his eyes. He was not familiar with the two and had not spoken more than 3 sentences to them. However, at this time, the two of them pretended to warn him, acting as if they were concerned about him. How could he not see the contempt and mockery hidden in the depths of their eyes under the smiles on their faces? Seeing that the two of them were about to say something, he said coldly, "Senior brothers, you don't have to worry about me." Chen Su and Tang Iluo's faces stiffened. They smiled embarrassedly and returned to their seats. But in their hearts, they were cursing Ji Tianxing for not knowing what was good for him. After a while, all the elders and more than a dozen deacons came to the square one after another. On the east side of the square, several rows of spectator seats had already been set up. After the elders and deacons took their seats in the spectator seats, they greeted each other and talked for a while. Not long after, the sect master, Chu Tianxing, also came to the square with Yun Yao. Everyone bowed to Chu Tianxing with a solemn face. Chu Tianxing nodded slightly and motioned for everyone to dispense with the formalities. He walked to the north of the square with majestic steps and sat down on the jade throne. Yun Yao, dressed in a white dress, stood quietly beside the throne like a fairy. Hundreds of disciples were secretly looking at Yun Yao with awe and admiration in their eyes. Yun Yao, on the other hand, had no one else in her eyes. She was looking for Ji Tianxing in the crowd. When she saw Ji Tianxing was also looking at her. When their eyes met, she nodded slightly and gave Ji Tianxing an encouraging look. Chapter 297. Chu Tianxing also looked at Ji Tianxing. He could not help but stare at him a little longer. Ordinary disciples could not tell, but he could tell that Ji Tianxing's strength had reached level 5 mystic comprehending stage. Surprise and relief flashed in the depths of his eyes. His solemn expression turned indifferent. It was obvious that he was full of confidence in Ji Tianxing. Everyone had finally arrived. The Heaven List tournament was about to begin. Chu Tianxing sat upright on his throne and looked down at the crowd. He said in a deep voice, "Today, our sect will hold the annual Heaven List tournament." His voice was as loud as a bell, explaining the significance and importance of the Heaven List tournament in a dignified tone. After that, he said in a solemn tone, "This year's Heaven List tournament will be hosted by Inner Elder Yi Hong as usual." Yi Hong immediately walked out of the crowd and saluted Chu Tianxing. "Yes, sect leader." Then, he stepped into the arena and announced loudly, "I believe everyone already knows that today's Heaven List tournament will be different from the previous ones. Before the tournament begins, 2 disciples will have to follow the sect's rules and settle their personal grudges first. The sect's rules have always been that we will not interfere with the personal grudges between disciples. However, any conflict between disciples must be resolved according to the sect's rules. This time, I will supervise the duel with everyone present. Ji Tianxing, Bai Wuchen, according to your agreement, the loser will be a servant disciple for a year. If neither of you have any objections and no one forfeits, please step into the arena." As soon as Yi Hong finished speaking, Bai Wuchen took the lead and walked out of the crowd. He rushed into the arena in a flash. He looked at Ji Tianxing confidently and proudly. The corners of his mouth curled up into a disdainful sneer. Ji Tianxing ignored his provocation and walked into the arena expressionlessly. The two of them stood still in the arena, facing each other with a 10-meter gap between them. Bai Wuchen looked askance at Ji Tianxing and said in a mocking tone, "Junior brother Ji, it seems like you're ready to be a servant. Beg me. As long as you beg for mercy in front of everyone, I will let you lose in a decent manner." Ji Tianxing looked at him expressionlessly and asked coldly, "Bai Wuchen, how many moves do you think you can take from me?" His expression and tone did not have the slightest arrogance or provocation, as if he was asking a very serious question. Bai Wuchen's expression changed, and he shouted angrily, "Arrogant. I should be the one asking you that question." Ji Tianxing's face was as calm as ever. As if he was explaining the truth, he said slowly, "Bai Wuchen, if you can survive 3 moves from me, consider it my loss." Hearing this, Bai Wuchen was so angry that his face turned ashen. His eyes were burning with rage. "Ji Tianxing, you don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. With your meager strength, you dare to boast so shamelessly?" He couldn't believe that Ji Tianxing would actually say such arrogant words in front of everyone. He was simply too arrogant. This was the most blatant and direct humiliation. The elders and deacons in the audience were stunned when they heard Ji Tianxing's words. Some of them were stunned, thinking that they had misheard and that Ji Tianxing was too arrogant. Some of them looked at Ji Tianxing playfully, thinking that he must be bluffing to provoke Bai Wuchen. There were also people who had expectant looks in their eyes, waiting to enjoy this fierce battle. At this time, inner sect elder Yi Hong asked solemnly, Ji Tianxing, do you mean what you said? Ji Tianxing nodded expressionlessly. All of a sudden, the hundreds of inner disciples in the square were stunned. Their faces were filled with astonishment. The elders and deacons couldn't help but be moved. Their gazes toward Ji Tianxing became even more serious. The crowd could not believe that what he said was true. It was not a bluff. When had Bai Wuchen ever been humiliated in public? He was so angry that he was about to go crazy. His entire face had turned green, but he forcefully suppressed his anger so that he wouldn't lose his mind and lose his mind. Good. Good. Ji Tianxing, you asked for it. He glared at Ji Tianxing, gritted his teeth, and growled, I'd like to see how you're going to defeat me in 3 moves. At the same time, inner sect elder Yi Hong waved his hand and activated the defensive array of the arena. A khaki-colored shield with a radius of 100 meters enveloped the entire arena, isolating it from the square. Only Ji Tianxing and Bai Wuchen were in the arena. Even if they fought until the sun and moon dimmed, it would not affect the audience. Yi Hong's voice was like a great bell as he said, I declare that the battle begins. As soon as he finished speaking, Bai Wuchen, who was on the verge of going berserk, pulled out his sword as fast as he could. He waved his sword and shot out 36 rays of dazzling sword radiance toward Ji Tianxing. This was Bai Wuchen's unique sword art, the celestial 36 swords. It was a black-level sword art. He unleashed all of his power. The sword radiance was so fast that it looked like lightning streaking across the sky. The area within a radius of 10 meters was instantly enveloped by the 36 rays of sword radiance, turning it into a death zone. Each ray of sword radiance was aimed at Ji Tianxing's vital points. They were all fatal moves. Upon seeing this, the hundreds of inner disciples could not help but stare with their eyes wide open, their hearts in their throats. Everyone wanted to know how Ji Tianxing was going to deal with this. Would he be able to dodge Bai Wuchen's fatal attack? No one expected Ji Tianxing to be so calm and expressionless in the face of such a powerful attack. Not only did he have no intention of retreating, he did not even take out his sword. He just raised his left hand. His aura was as heavy as a mountain. He unhurriedly slapped his palm toward Bai Wuchen. Seeing this, the crowd in the square was stunned. They could not believe their eyes. They did not know whether to laugh or cry, and they looked at Bai Wuchen with contempt. Is he going to fight senior brother Bai with his bare hands? He's not going to draw his sword. Isn't he too arrogant? Ji Tianxing is still pretending. He's really courting death. Humph. This guy is too arrogant. All kinds of thoughts flashed through the crowd's mind. However, only a few people noticed that Ji Tianxing's left arm and palm had turned red like fire, as if they were made of magma. As his palm struck out with the force of a mountain, the 100-meter-wide arena suddenly became as hot as fire. It was as if even the air was burning. 100 meters above the arena, a giant flaming palm suddenly appeared out of thin air. The giant flaming palm was 20 meters wide. It was formed by violent red flames. It fell from the sky like a meteor and slammed toward Bai Wuchen. At that moment, the entire square was illuminated by the flames. It was as if several suns had appeared in the sky. Hundreds of outer sect disciples could feel the unusual heat. They could not help but look up at the sky. When they saw the giant flaming palm descending from the sky, everyone's faces were filled with shock as they let out shocked cries. Bai Wuchen was also dumbfounded. He stared at the giant flaming palm with fear and despair in his eyes. He absolutely could not believe it. With Ji Tianxing's strength, how could he unleash such a terrifying attack? How could a martial artist in the mystic comprehending realm possess such an abnormal skill? Just as these thoughts flashed through his mind, the giant flaming palm from the sky engulfed his body. Boom! A deafening explosion that shook the heavens suddenly exploded in the square and immediately spread throughout the entire heaven-upholding peak. In that instant, the 100-meter arena was flooded with flames, and the defensive array was turned into a sea of flames. It was impossible to see anything clearly.